This week on NWP, we get into a really big fist fight over the best consoles of all time, and then reminisce about the time when the world was supposed to end. Hello everyone and welcome to Nerds Without Pants, episode 107. We cover everything while bearing it all. I am Julian, and I'm joined as always by Patrick.
Millennium, Will Smith.
That's so going into the show too. Oh, you don't even know. And Angelo.
In the year 2000!
That's also going in.
That was hard to do.
It is hard to do. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty standard episode of the show, but we've got a lot of fun stuff in store. Yeah, there's not really any preamble this time because there's no new reviews and nothing like that. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Let's do some stage select, guys. And stage select was my pick for this episode, and I wanted to know, because we have the Nintendo Switch coming, like, literally days after this recording is going live. This is coming out on the Wednesday before the Switch is released, so I wanted to know, what are your top 3 favorite home consoles of all time? Obviously, the Switch is kind of like a portable too. We'll do portables some other time, but I wanted to know home consoles, not PC. Nothing like that. We'll go around the room like we normally do. 3, 2, 1. Patrick, why don't you go first? What's your number 3?
Well, dang, I actually forgot that it was only the home console. So my third one was Game Boy, and that's out. But I wanted to put Super Nintendo in anyway. Even though I didn't have one, I know how important that was to video games in general, and it probably should have been there over Game Boy. I was just putting Game Boy there because of like what it did for the portable industry, and well, you know where that'll be when we do portables. But yeah, I think the Super Nintendo is like the console that I wanted the most out of all consoles that I haven't had. And I know that, you know, like 4, 5, and 6 for Final Fantasies were on there for, the Americas in some form or another. And there were like, you know, the original Mario Kart and things like that that just were groundbreaking in ways that Nintendo would maybe never get to again. So I think it's pretty good for putting that number 3. Did you want me to do all 3 of them?
No, we'll go around. Actually, Super Nintendo is my number 3 also. It's weird to put it at number 3 because I really, when we started this, I thought it was going to be number 1. But, you know, I have thought a lot about what you said, Patrick, about like trying to separate nostalgia from like overall experience. And it's like, I love the Super Nintendo. Like, I love me some Mode 7. Angelo, like, when you posted, like, the R-Type 3 stuff, you were like, oh, like, too bad the sound chip couldn't handle this, but I'm one of those people who's like, I love the way that Super Nintendo sounds, like...
I like certain, like, some of those soundtracks are great. I just think that particular soundtrack needed a whole lot more punch than that thing could give.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
Because, like, there's been, like, this scuttlebutt recently about trying to, like, say that like the Genesis had like a better sound than the Super Nintendo. It's like, no, Genesis sounded like it was recorded underwater. Like,
yeah,
I won't entertain that argument. But
if we were going nostalgia, then like Sega Genesis would probably be my number 1 because I got that when I was around 13. Like, I probably should have put that somewhere in there. But I know that there was just like a dearth of games near the end of that cycle, like the N64, which is the other one I was just thinking about putting as number 3, and I just couldn't for the life of me based on the second half of its life cycle.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, the Super Nintendo has an amazing library. I mean, we talked at the beginning of Stage Select about like our top 5 games, and it's like, what, like 3 of them are on my list are from the or 2 of them from Super Nintendo. So obviously, you know, I have great love for the system. It's just that the other 2 systems on my list, they represent certain time periods that were like that awesome sweet spot of money and time, where at the Super Nintendo, I was very much still stuck with just renting or just borrowing. I had very few games of my own, because we just didn't have a lot of money. I owned I think my new games, I could almost count them on one hand. It was like Super Metroid, Final Fantasy III, Illusion of Gaia, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, and then the ones that came with my system, because I actually got a hell of a deal where my system came packed in with Super Mario World and Super Mario Kart, and then it came with a send away for Mario All-Stars. So that was a whole lot of Mario goodness right before without even buying anything else. So I lucked out there. But yeah, it's got to be on number 3. It's number 3.
And I love Super Mario All-Stars so much that when I went to my cousin's house, he literally hid that game. I'm convinced, because when I went over the last couple times, it was just not there anymore. He's like, I don't know what happened to it. Why not play this sports game?
Try some NBA Jam.
You'll never guess what my number 3 is.
I really can't. This is
It's a Super Nintendo.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it really
I feel good then. I feel good. I really felt that picking it as number 3, people were good, y'all were going to be like, what the hell is wrong with you?
No,
what are you even talking about?
And we're on the same, you talk about sprite scaling, sprite rotation, it's a great system. It really is. And I think it had the superior sound chip. I've said that before. It did lack, so if you wanted to make a game that sounded like you were playing a grungy rock band, a real gritty sound, the Genesis was your system. If you haven't heard the Musha soundtrack, for example, go listen to Musha Aleste, or I forget what it was called in the US. Musha. It was Musha, but it was Musha. They made an acronym out of it. That is the epitome of that soundtrack. The Genesis one, but the Super Nintendo, it didn't. There were times where it came across as kind of weak, and I mentioned R-Type as one of those examples because they were going for a real metal sound, and it just sounded muted. But it still sounds great, because it's built off of a chip from a synthesizer, from a keyboard. So it had all these crazy built-in samples and just really nice sounds. It just had that slightly less edgy quality to it. But anyway, as far as the system goes, I think I've weighted my list a little bit differently than you guys did. As far as I guess I went more with impact and maybe just accomplishments as far as systems went. And I still think even on that, it's funny that I think we all weighted our lists a little bit differently. We all came up with the SNES at number 3. Mm-hmm. And I think it was, it was part 2 of the Nintendo thing that it was doing. It was the logical continuation from the NES. Great all-around system, fantastic library, one of the best. Especially if you're going to look at cartridge-based systems on their own, maybe the best. I think it, on average, had much better quality than, say, the NES did. If you just look at ratios of good games to, mediocre or, poor games versus good and excellent games, I think the Super Nintendo kind of comes out ahead. Maybe the barrier entry was that much higher that they couldn't just, shovel stuff out the door.
Well, and especially for this particular group where we're so dialed into RPGs, and it's NES had its handful, but it's Super Nintendo was the smorgasbord of instant classics that have now become almost legendary,
Right.
So that alone.
The Genesis had a better processor. The numbers are in, and they've been in for a while. And if you wanted a fast, really just tight arcade experience, and maybe you didn't mind the sound chip so much.
And you didn't mind that all the blues were actually purple.
Also that, the color palette was a little bit messed up on that.
I feel Sonic was pretty blue, no?
Sonic was very blue.
Yeah, but if you look at a lot of if you compare ports of games that are on both systems, the blues are almost invariably purplish because on the Genesis, because the Genesis just can't. It doesn't have the breadth of the color palette that the Super Nintendo has.
Of the wild?
It didn't.
I see what you did there.
It had a better, faster processor. The Nintendo made up ground in a lot of ways with tricks, Mode 7. And Mode 7 gets its name Mode 7 because it was number 7 in the sort of built-in tricks that the system could do. So there were a whole lot of little trick things, it could generate polygons. That's kind of cool. I don't think the Genesis could do that without add-ons. I could be wrong. Someone correct me. That wasn't my system, but yeah. So
and it seems like, and I could be wrong on this too, but it seems like the Super Nintendo on a cartridge level was able to be more upgradable because they were definitely, and it's not just the FX chip, but like you got to remember, like Capcom had like a special chip for like Mega Man X, like 2 and 3 that enhanced the graphics, and the stuff that like Square did with Chrono Trigger. Like you look at those spell effects.
Oh man,
like that was stuff that you couldn't do that on the Genesis or even at the beginning of the Super Nintendo.
Chrono Trigger. I mean, just the fact that Chrono Trigger is on that makes it, puts it on this list.
I should maybe put that at number one now.
Like, think about the lists we could do, for example, for this feature, where we wouldn't include Chrono Trigger. Like, oh, we're going to throw out best ending themes. Chrono Trigger is going to be on that. Best soundtracks. Chrono Trigger is going to be on that. Best cast of characters. Chrono Trigger. I could go on all day. Like Chrono Trigger is going to be top 3 in like most of these things.
Why does that not get replicated like more? I mean,
people tried.
Yeah, but they didn't do it.
Square couldn't even do it. I would argue that Chrono Cross, which tried to be like the successor to, Chrono Cross is a great game. We've discussed this. It's not Chrono Trigger though. It didn't do what Chrono Trigger did. This is not a Chrono Trigger discussion.
It can be.
Well,
I'm listening.
But it had like
back off like I Am Setsuna I still want to play, which is that was very much like a new studio within Square saying we want to make a game like Chrono Trigger, and I hear it's pretty solid. I still want to play it. Patrick will probably end up getting it for his Switch because it's gonna be on there.
If I ever get a Switch, I mean, I don't know about this anymore, guys.
My favorite Zelda is on the Super Nintendo. My tied for first place Mario game is on the Super Nintendo. My favorite RPG is on the Super Nintendo. I mean, that's a good system.
That was hard not to put that at number one then.
I have reasons I stacked my list the way I did.
Such as, what's your number 2?
Well, it's your turn, Patrick. What's your number 2?
Oh, I don't know. I wanted more time. No, my number 2 is the PS2. I think that I was going for what like made one of the most big impacts in a lot of different ways. In addition to being backwards compatible almost fully with the PS1, I didn't have a PS1, so PS2 was my first foray into like the Sony brand, and so that's also the first time I got to play Chrono Trigger, weirdly, because it was in the Final Fantasy anthology. There were a lot of different games that were able to be ported to it easily, in addition to just being like the first media player that I had, and it did some of the best graphics at the time when I got to play like Metal Gear Solid 2, but I also got to go back and play Metal Gear Solid 1 when I was like first able to play those kinds of games. So maybe it was a little bit nostalgia for me, but it was also the fact that it was like the first time the games had like an Ethernet add-on where you could play things like SOCOM, and I'm not really sure what else really, because a lot of those things just like screwed up for me and I couldn't end up playing the games that I was supposed to be able to play for some reason while I was trying to play with the Ethernet, but that was mostly like my connection, and I think that was the problem there. But overall, like if things had worked right, like Final Fantasy 11 came out on a console for the first time, and those kind of games like were, I think, a big impact on the industry and like paved the way for the way the PS4 was seamlessly able to integrate online with offline gaming. And in general, a lot of the favorite franchises of mine I played for the first time there, like Ratchet and Clank and Jak and Daxter and things like that.
It really hit home, I think, when we did the last edition of Chrono Crossing for 2001, because I was like going down that list and I was like, holy shit, franchise. Like, but the beginning, it's like you got Devil May Cry, Onimusha, Zone of the Enders, Grand Theft Auto 3, which, yeah, it's the third one, but it's the first one of that style. It's like these monumental games where it's like, oh yeah, this is a PlayStation 2 thing. Like some of them would eventually go to other systems, obviously, but I think of those games as PlayStation 2 game. Or even to this day, I got the PS4, and I said this at the beginning, because there's still certain franchises, even if they've gone multi-platform, that I consider Sony. Metal Gear, Silent Hill. Well, Silent Hill's dead in the water, but Final Fantasy, because it's been with Sony since like the PS1. So I still want to be pressing triangle, X, square, and circle when I play some of these games, even though like I have more migrated to the Xbox. It's like, to me, it's like they are synonymous with the PlayStation brand. And I mean, when I think about going back and playing like my old stuff, I'm constantly drawn back to my PS2 section because I'm like, oh man, I love this game. Or, you know, I haven't played this game, or I would love to, you know, go back to the beginning of this franchise. And yeah, the PlayStation 2 is just something damn special.
Yeah.
That is not my number 2. My number 2 might be a little controversial. I don't know. I think Angela will back me up on this, but we'll see. My number 2 is the Xbox 360.
Oh, that's a solid pick.
No.
No, yeah, it is.
Yeah. And the reason is, like I said, it has to do with like the time in my life where, you know, I like the Xbox 360 came out when I was in my first apartment. I was on my own. I remember buying it and like, you know, like hooking it up to like a SD TV, you know, and it looked like garbage because I had it hooked up wrong at first, and then got it looking the way it was supposed to, and, you know, instantly falling in love with achievements, and then actually playing games online a little bit. Like I didn't do a ton of it, but, you know, I played some Halo 3 online. You know, I actually played all the way through it with a friend of mine from Game Fellas and his friend in like 24 hours. We've had the whole thing beaten on Legendary mode of all things. But,
Wow.
you know, like, again, super awesome library. Like one of the best libraries, I think, just period. You know, you had great exclusives on there like Gears of War, Halo, of course, Alan Wake. But then you had like just great, you know, 'cause, I mean, they were the king of the roost that for most of that generation. So it's like they got the benefit of getting the best of everything that was multi-platform. You know, like you think like Bayonetta is best on the Xbox 360. Like it got ported by a bad company. Like for the PS3, you got an inferior version, unfortunately. Like, you know, Dead Space, like, yeah, it was multi-platform, but it's like the Xbox 360 just like, especially Dead Space 1 had like some extra goodies that you got because it was on the Xbox. And, I don't know, like I love that system. I thought the controller was great. You know, I liked the interface even throughout the different iterations. It kind of sucks that it's one of the worst made consoles of all time. Cause I am on my third Xbox 360 and I have a fourth one held in reserve just in case because I own way too many 360 games to not be able to play them down the road. So I have a new 360 like ready to go when this one dies.
Damn.
Yeah, Gears of War is one of those like moments. We talked a lot about like video game moments like last time we all got together, and because we were talking about like the intros to things and stuff like that. I still remember watching the beginning part of Gears of War and thinking, oh man, this is what this console's capable of. And I think a lot of people had that moment, but just like, yeah, sure, the colors are muted and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
It was also one of the
detail.
first games that did that. And then everybody, I think, aped that style. I'm not saying it was the first, but it was one of the first. But I just remember like the subtle touches and just like the gorgeous, the roadie run. It sounds like the stupidest thing in the world, but just the fact that like when you started to run with your character, the camera swung down low and all of a sudden acted like a handheld was just the coolest thing to me. You know, like who thinks like that was something I would have never thought of, and it makes that animation seem so much better. And the game was just full of stuff like that. Like, you know, you shoot Halo, you shoot somebody a bunch of times, and then you walk up and you smack them with a bullet or a rifle, and they fall over. This time, you shoot somebody a bunch of times, and then you cut them in half. You know, let's get edgy. So
Literally.
And let's of course not forget gems like Sneak King and Pocket Bike Racers, which were like the Burger King games. We can't omit those. No, I'm just kidding.
But there were a lot of commercials I saw that
can.
had like extra features only on 360, and I was like, why? You know, like because there's so many people who bought Madden for 360 or something like that, and I just couldn't understand it for the life of me. And I don't know. As a fanboy, I was glad that it switched after that generation or toward the end of that generation when Microsoft was like, oh yeah, we never really meant to make games in general for this system. We're not making any more. We'll make another system, but there's not going to be any games for that either.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft was so hungry with the 360, you know, because like they got in with the Xbox and they're like, okay, like we felt out the waters. We didn't really do what we were hoping to do, but we've got the basics down. So now let's go ahead and put everything we've got into this new console. We're going to release it a year before anything else, and then just dominate for like, you know, I'd say a good 6, maybe 7 years. Like it took PlayStation a long time to really. I mean, and they have like now that we're all done and dusted, like the PS3 did sell more units than the 360, but it was like a hard fought battle over a long period of time, and it really was because I think like they were like maybe they got a little complacent. Yeah, Microsoft, but also they were. I think they were just like, I don't know. They lost that like edge of trying to like get exclusives for the system, and meanwhile Sony was getting more and more exclusives. Yeah, you know, on a regular basis. So yeah,
they probably saw it wasn't cost effective because if you look at like Sony as a whole and Microsoft as a whole, that Sony is propped up by their video game like section of the company, and Microsoft is like weighed down by it. So
right, that's a good point.
It maybe not a good thing for Nintendo, except for their hubris. I mean, not Nintendo, Sony, Nintendo too, but I just can't make a really educated decision on the 360. And I was wondering about their RPG selection. Like, I know there's Fable, but like, which ones came out on that, and like, which other ones do I not know about that I should that would prop this up to like the second best console of all time?
There aren't a whole lot of RPGs. There's like Blue Dragon and Lost Odyssey are the first two that come to mind. Oh, and Tales of Vesperia. What do you have? I'm sorry.
They had like solid RPGs, but not necessarily like stellar RPGs. But you got to remember too, like a lot of those did end up being multi-platform. So yeah, like, you know, Eternal Sonata came out for both systems. Like, yeah, a lot of the Tales or some of the Tales games came out for both. And then you've got like, well, Mass Effect 1, I mean, you can play it on the PS3 now with the trilogy. But for the longest time, that was a Microsoft exclusive.
Yeah. Right.
And that, I mean, I've said many times that I think it's the best in the series.
And most people like me won't go back to it because there's already been other ones and just because of the number.
Right. But, you know, I think that the RPGs were good, you know, and some of them were great, but a lot of them are on both systems. So, you know, I think especially for me during that generation, that's where I made the flip. Like I went really hard on Western RPGs. I've played very few of the Japanese RPGs during that time. I played Eternal Sonata. I played a little bit of Last Remnant. I played like 10 hours of Lost Odyssey. But by and large, you know, I was like, oh, let me play Dragon Age. Let me play Mass Effect. You know, let me try to play Fallout 3 15 times. Let me play all the Fables because I love Fable 2 and 3, even though they're very flawed. I really enjoy those games. So,
you know, that's funny because I really liked Lost Odyssey and I really liked, what was the other one? Oh, Fallout 3. Like, I really liked those games.
Yeah, I mean, I liked what I played of Lost Odyssey. It's just at the time, we've talked about this before. Like, I burnt myself out on that style of RPG over the course of like Super Nintendo, PS1, and PS2. So once I played Mass Effect, I was like, oh, this is so new. Because really, like, you know, not to get too far afield, but I knew that something had changed when I bought Final Fantasy 12 and I played it for about 25 hours and I set it down for a while. Then I got Mass Effect 1 and played all the way through it straight, like 40 hours. You know, I finished that game, did everything. And then I went back and finished Final Fantasy 12 and I was like, and it took me like 70 hours total. I think it was a long ass game. And then I remember thinking, in 70 hours, I feel less invested in these characters than the 40 hours that I spent on Mass Effect. And that was the moment. I was like, there's something to this. Like, I really like this. And I'm switching, I'm moving back to the other way because like I've been away from JRPGs for so long that I'm like, oh, I really, you know, like, ooh, give me some Bravely Default, you know, give me some classic Final Fantasy. I need it because I miss it. But, you know, I still like Western RPGs. I just, I've kind of struck a balance now, but definitely for the 360 and PS3, I was like all in on the Western stuff and was kind of cooled my jets on the Japanese games. So, Angelo, I'm really curious now. What's your number 2?
The NES. dude, no console has ever done what the NES has done, at least not in North America. None.
Like bring games to everybody and make people understand how video games is.
Let's back up for a second.
Everything.
Before this, you either had to plunk down a crap ton of money for an Atari 2600, and I mean a crap ton, or you had to buy a computer, which wasn't really feasible for most people. And then the NES came along and just put video games in everybody's homes, and it dominated North America. For that, it was the only game in town for that entire generation. It brought video games back, you know. That's why it's number 2. Not necessarily because it's something I go back to a lot. It's really not. Like, you know, the NES Mini is here, and yes, there are some games I absolutely love that are NES games, but video games wouldn't be what they are now. And I really think this is true if it wasn't for that console. At least not here.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm not going to argue that.
I don't think any console. I honestly think it had more impact than the one I picked for number 1. And I think that's why it gets the number 2 spot. Plus, you know, there's just so many great moments tied to that system in my memory. But mostly it gets its spot because of it's just freaking what it did for games.
Like the first time you hit the open world in Zelda 2 and you just die a bunch of times.
I liked Zelda 2 a lot. In fact, and that's one of those memories is going over to my cousin's house and them being stuck in Zelda 2. My 5 cousins that were all girls, I was over at their house and they were stuck on Zelda 2 and we were trying to figure out like what to do. That was a lot of fun.
And what I love about the NES is like all the mascots that didn't end up being mascots, like Alex Kidd.
Oh, that's
Sega.
Oh shit. That's Sega.
Well, thanks for playing.
Cut! Cut. Damn it. I'm almost done with the bottle of wine.
But there are other things, like, you know, there's Balloon Fight. There's just Balloon Fight. Like, there's been no sequels. There's been nothing else.
Ice Climbers.
That is a game that I will fire up even to this day because mechanically alone, it's still sound. It just is. It's a good little single-screen arcade game.
And it's good on 3DS, too, I think.
Yeah. I have it on the NES Classic. But
I've got zero love for Balloon Fight.
I know you do.
Ice Climbers and Urban Champion, like...
No, okay. 2 of those are garbage. Ice Climbers and Urban Champion are trash, but Balloon Fight is great, man.
Except if you use Ice Climbers in Melee and you do their infinite combo where you grab somebody and keep throwing them down and they can't do anything about it.
No, then everyone hates you. And,
yeah. And you win.
No, I really like that game. I can make that game just loop over and over and over again. Like, I just got really good at it.
Or the original Kid Icarus, which took so long to get a sequel to, that's actually pretty good.
The original Kid Icarus is good. I just think it was a little... Well, no, I wouldn't say... People would say it's ahead of its time. It's like, no, it was groundbreaking. It was a good game. It was playable. Other games came along later and did it better.
It's tough.
That's another thing, too, is so many of the concepts we take for granted now were just birthed on that console. You know?
Sure.
And I almost look at the Super Nintendo as... the NES Plus, which is, you know, exactly what the name means. But that really is what it was. It was like, here's all these things that we developed on the NES. Either, you know, we have these RPGs and we have these platformers and we have these shoot 'em ups, and we're just going to make really great versions of them. And that's the SNES, you know, which is fine.
Right. Which is why I would argue that it should go ahead because of the NES, because it's like it did everything the NES did better.
But would it have done it without it?
But it didn't do it first. So where do you place the value? You know, like on the pioneers or on the people who built the cities? I mean, I don't know. It's potato, I suppose. This isn't something worth arguing about at all, if you want my opinion. It's just like, I think that was like just going back and seeing the innovation that took place during that generation is fascinating to me because all of this stuff was new concept. And that just, I don't know. I find that it's why it's number 2 for me.
Sure. So. Yeah. I think for me, you know, and like you said, we're going about our list differently. Cause like when I think about the Nintendo, there's not a lot of stuff where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go back to that. It's like Mike Tyson's Punch Out, Mario 3, Faxanadu, like a few others, but it's like, by and large, like, I don't really, like, when that was the thing, the NES Classic came out, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I don't really need to, like, I don't need this because,
really
I've got most of these games, but also it's like, for me, it's like, okay, it's Mega Man 1, it's the first 3 Mega Mans.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Contra, Castlevania 3 only. But then the Super Nintendo, it's like, I want to play all of these right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just want to, like, have a day and just, like, throw these all in a pile and then just go one after another until, like, I can't stay awake anymore.
I
mean, and the Nintendo, I'm like, yeah, I'm good.
So I could talk about the Super Nintendo all day long. I could talk about how much time we spent playing Rock and Roll Racing and freaking Metal Warriors and just, oh my gosh, that system. And how badly I wish I had bought that copy of R-Type 3 when I saw it for sale when Blockbuster was getting rid of their Super Nintendo games.
Ooh.
Oh.
Is it an expensive one now?
Yeah, it is. It's over $100. Because that's the only way to play R-Type 3.
Yeah, that's not terrible.
It was a console exclusive.
That's
it's not like the $1,000 track and field or something that you got to get on NES.
That is also one of those games where it's get to the level that makes you go backwards, and then you've beaten the game. It's that level. Even if you watch a video of somebody play through that entire game, when they get to the section of that level where you get to the boss and the game actually makes you like go backwards for a significant part, and then it's just pure memorization of the most random, weird laser puzzle crap. No, but I do love that game up until that point.
No, I'm totally with you, Angelo. And just to continue with this sort of train of thought, like I didn't really know how to go about my top 3, except I saw there's one console that was not only groundbreaking, like you were said with the NES, just the regular NES, no S.
Sure, that.
In addition to being very nostalgic for me and my first console in general, which is why for number 1 I picked the NES.
Nice.
Well
done, sir.
I couldn't really think of any other system that should be number 1 for me because it was my first console of all time, and I may have only gotten 2 games a year literally, like 1 game for Christmas, 1 game for Easter. God knows why. Literally.
That was another thing too. Yeah, the games were rare, man.
Yeah, and they were expensive. It seemed like to me because I didn't even make money for like 15 years later. And so, like when I got Mega Man 2, that's all I played, and I don't even know if I'd be able to beat a game like that now. But like it was all I could play for a whole like half a year until like the next game came to me, and I got like Mario 2 or Mario 3 or something like that, and then that was all I played as well. But not only is it like the most nostalgic system it will ever be for me, but if there were like an end boss or something or an end game like in Legend of Zelda and I had to play like Legend of Zelda 1, that still would be like scary and terrifying to me because I haven't memorized like the way that I'm supposed to go. And like, so that doesn't have like the best graphics or whatever, but it like will hit like that little itch in the back of my brain saying like, oh, this is the best thing ever of all time, and there's nothing that could ever beat it.
Yeah. Part of it for me might be also the fact that I got mine so late.
Yeah.
The only way that I got to experience the NES was at friends' houses, and occasionally I got to rent a system. But like I finally got a Nintendo the year before they stopped making them. It wasn't a top loader though, unfortunately. Like it was that weird little in between part before the top loader came out, but right before they discontinued the NES, and because I think the Super Nintendo had already come out, but so there was that for me. I mean, I have great memories of before then because like, for me it was like Nintendo Power, right? Like I knew more about video games than my friends who had video games, because I just read every single magazine every month, all the time, and But but then you bring up a good point. It's like the rarity of the games. Like other than renting, it was like when I got my Nintendo, I got Metroid, And then my dad liked Tetris on the Game Boy, so he got Tetris. And he never played it. So I had 2 games. And then the only other brand new game I ever got was Mega Man 4, which I paid for with allowance money.
I did
I
too.
saved for a long time.
I bought that one out of my own pocket. Mega Man 4.
Yeah. And then all of my other games, like I had a bunch of games. I had not a bunch. I had like 7 other games that I bought when this store called Farmore went out of business, and they used to rent games for like 69 cents for 3 days. And so I was there all the time, but they were selling games for like, I think like $15 or something like that. So I ended up buying a bunch of games then. But other than that, like all of my NES games were from Gamefellas and, eBay after the fact, but mostly Gamefellas.
Toward the end of the system, I did get a lot of games, and there's a funny story about it. But like, I also had to make those choices where like I got to make one choice. And I remember being in Toys R Us when I was really little, and I saw Mega Man for the first time, and I was like, oh my God, this little blue guy, blue's the best color ever, and he's got like this little thing on the end of his hand, he's shooting stuff with it. And then my parents were like, but don't you want the first one? And I was like, oh, that doesn't look very good. I don't like the cover of that one. Because it's so much different as Rockman than like when cover. It's so bad. I'm so glad I got number 2 first. But not only that, not only those like rarity of the games, not only the fact that I think the best level ever, Mario 1-1, and also the second best level ever, Mario 1-2, are both on the same game and on that system. I also have those little nostalgic memories of getting my first games for the first time. And one of the times, it was near Christmas, and I had a friend come over, and we were just playing in my parents' bedroom or something like that. Like they had a big bed and we were jumping on it. And while we are jumping on it, my one friend sees like this, it's like a shoebox or something on the top of my dad's, like clothing rack. It was like above that where you put like a few different things on a little shelf. He's like, wait, what's that up there? And we took a coat hanger. We opened the coat hanger so that we could reach it because we were so tiny. We couldn't get up there. And we were like jumping and like pulling the coat hanger back. And all of a sudden, like 20 games fell down out of nowhere, and we're like, what? I was like, I don't know what this is. What is this? Oh my God, these are all Nintendo games. What? And we asked my parents, and because they were getting them for Christmas for me, I think, like they were all used games from someone else they knew who didn't want the system anymore. At the very end of the cycle, they were like, oh, this must have been from like the people who were here before us or something like that. And they just totally lied because they didn't want to say like, oh yeah, those were the games for Christmas and you just fucked up the entire present. But then my friend and I just like had made this discovery, and not only did I get more things that year because of it, but I also like had this awesome little moment in time where that friend only came over like once and apparently found those games like right away. Like, I don't know what he was sniffing out in the world, but thank you, Kyle.
Nice.
Yeah.
I remember when the system was all but dead, my dad just came home one day and he had like a box with like a bunch of Nintendo games in it, and they were all super old Nintendo games. I mean, we're talking like the launch Donkey Kong. Alpha Mission was another one. Games like of that very, very early NES era, but a bunch of them, and we were just like, we're playing these because somebody was getting rid of them at a garage sale.
This is the system that they had to take me in because they thought something was wrong with me. I was looking at screens too often. This is the system, the only system ever that I've literally broken from playing too much. I know Julian's broken many, but like for me, that's a special thing.
But mine isn't from playing too much. Mine is because I choose like poorly made systems.
Yeah, Xbox.
Which actually my number one system is also one of the poorest made systems of all time, which is the PlayStation 2. So
nice.
We already talked about it, but for all the reasons I already said, like, but even now, it's like now that I have my game room set up and everything, like one of the things that I was drawn to the most was like popping in a PS2 game using the progressive scan cables or the component cables in progressive scan mode on an HD TV. Like those games still look nice. They don't look abstracted. Like the PS1, you got to meet them halfway as far as what they're trying to show you. Where the PS2, it's like, oh no, I know what this is supposed to be. Like this is a guy, like I can see his mouth moving and stuff like that. But also, one thing I forgot to say is like, this was like that great blend of the madcap zaniness of stuff getting published on the PS1, but also like with the great gameplay and like new mechanics and stuff that have been learned over all that time.
Right.
Because you've got great games like the Onimusha series and Devil May Cry. Like Capcom was killing it. Stuff like Champions of Norath and like all these amazing RPGs like Dark Cloud 2 and Rogue Galaxy and, all sorts of stuff, Xenosaga. But then you've got insanity like Mr. Mosquito and Mad Maestro and Guitaru Man and, just these wacky, zany games that would not exist today, unless they were just downloadable titles that, nobody ever paid attention to.
That actually gives me hope for the future, though, because I think there's been such high development costs in the last couple of generations with like $5,000 development systems that you can't really program for because you just spent all your money. And now that you've just done all that, like as an indie developer, you've got to make something conservative. But now with like the Switch, where it only costs $450 to buy a dev system, hopefully that's like the beginning of things to come. And how PS5 and 6 and things like that will get those kind of zany games that happen when people didn't realize what was going to sell or not, because maybe it won't matter so much anymore. And they're trying to make more unique things again, like they were originally when there weren't formulas to success.
Well, and I think we are still getting those zany games, but my point is that like there's zany games that have their place in like the digital market where it's like, hey, we made this funny game or this crazy game, it's $10 or $15 or whatever. It's going to get promoted for like 3 days on the storefront and then you'll never hear about it again, where it's like, no, Mr. Mosquito is a $39.99 game that was released on store shelves that it, at least at like Game Fellas had like, like we were displaying it proudly on the system or, or Guitaru Man, that's a full price $49.99 game that is like this weird kid with like a robotic dog and a guitar that he's using to fight evil. That's a disc game that, cause obviously that's all it could be, but like that's kind of the thing for me. It's like, there's tons of that type of stuff now. It's just, it doesn't get the eyes on it that they probably deserve because there's just so much out there in the AAA space these days.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, it's like the PlayStation 2 was like that great sweet spot where it's like you got both. You got the best of both of that. So Angelo, I'm curious. What's numero uno?
Nobody's mentioned it yet.
Sega Dreamcast.
No, I didn't own a Dreamcast. I wish I did though, because that is one of the coolest systems out there. But no, it's the original PlayStation.
You respect that.
That's my number one.
Yeah.
And you can probably figure out why just based on what I talked about with the NES, because it was kind of like part two of that same thing. Like there wasn't a real, in my opinion, revolution in gaming until the PlayStation came along. And Nintendo, the Nintendo 64 was kind of doing the same thing. They're like, all right, well now we have the Super Nintendo, let's make a better Super Nintendo, right? And then Sony kind of came in and said, yeah, we're just going to do things a little bit differently. And they sure did. And you had a system that did stuff completely differently. And again, it was one of those things where, we talked about this a lot when we talked about our gaming intros. They changed how games were presented, just in general. Like they went from the attract mode type of approach to a video game, which is what every single video game did, to you have to have an opening cinematic. And that's what you have to bring people in with. Like it changed everything. And I mean, went on from there. A lot of it was improvements on the formula, but in some cases, it was just the system was capable of doing things that home consoles weren't capable of doing before then. And I still remember, it felt like another arcade capable system. Whereas the NES and the Super Nintendo kind of felt like they were trying to, you played an arcade port on those, and it felt like, well, we took the arcade system and we pulled out a few things. Like you look at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for example, right? You had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, and then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game on the NES. That's what they called it. And it, sure, they made a big deal about, oh yeah, we added more levels and we did this and we did that, but it didn't look nearly as good. Not even close. Gradius, had like flicker all over the place, and it didn't have slowdown if I remember correctly, but it did. It felt like it was struggling to kind of like keep up with what it was able to do. But But then when you played a Super Nintendo game, you could play like the example I'm thinking of is Area 51, and I know that's probably a terrible example because the game is but I was really good at it. And I was really good at it in the arcades, and I was really good at it at home, and it translated almost perfectly, at least to me. So there was a lot more of that one-to-one sort of transition stuff there. But RPGs took on a whole new life. A lot of different things, just because now you had these 3D environments that previously you had to either fake using like Mode 7 and the occasional polygon. Now you had a polygonal world, and man, you could do anything in that. Your racing games took on a different feel. Your platformers certainly took on a different feel. Like, they didn't get platformers right till halfway through that generation. You had games like Metal Gear. I mean, is that all I have to say about that? Yeah. A game to surpass Metal Gear. I don't know. You had nanomachines. But, you had like the burgeoning of, okay, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this by saying this was a bad game. Nightmare Creatures is a bad game. Okay?
It is, but I loved it.
I did too. And you know what? When you think about it, like that and a couple of other games were like kind of poking at that character action genre that wouldn't really come into play until the next generation with like Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden and stuff like that.
Did you play Death Trap Dungeon?
Refresh my memory. What was it?
Yeah.
Maybe.
It's a third-person, like, medieval action game that is not good, but I liked it too. Like, it's real rough.
Was it like super slow and stiff? Because I think maybe, I think I did play that.
Yeah. It was about as stiff as Perfect Weapon, which is also a terrible
What about Brave Fencer Musashi?
I loved Brave Fencer Musashi, dude.
I kept looking at that game. Oh, I saw that so many different like used video game stores, and I never was able to buy it because it was just never cheap enough for me, even used. Like, dang, I still want to play it.
I bought that game new. Well, no, I don't want to say I bought it for the Final Fantasy VIII demo. I was on a huge Squaresoft kick then. Like, if it said Squaresoft on the label, I just wanted it. But I saw that game and I saw the Final Fantasy VIII demo, and the two of them were like, well, it's Squaresoft and there's a demo for Final Fantasy VIII on here. I want this. And I liked that game. And it kind of was my introduction into the super cheesy but also absolutely zany and kind of adorable world of like weird Japanese comedy, because there's a lot of that in that game. Yeah, there was a whole lot of just like unique stuff on that system too. It was PS2 the perfection, a perfection of it, and it got better and better and better, yes. But I think, again, the pioneering system was the PS1. And that's kind of why I have that much respect for it. Also, Symphony of the Night, come on. Come on.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, I could play all those things on the Vita now, but like, you didn't see me rank that number one? Well, I can't, but I would have. No, I'm just kidding.
If we had gotten Seiken Densetsu 3 on the Super Nintendo, maybe that would have bumped it up a notch. Because I don't know if you ever played that game. You have to emulate it. There's no other way to get it in the States, or like
what is that
whole system and do all that stuff to get it to work over here.
I have the Super Famicom cartridge.
There you go.
What is it?
Yeah,
it is really good.
it's the sequel to Secret of Mana
that we didn't get.
I mean, it's the third game, because the Secret of Mana that we got was actually the second game.
Well, we got Final Fantasy Adventure
over here. Yeah,
was Secret of Mana.
Yeah, Final Fantasy Adventure on the Game Boy was actually Secret of Mana 1.
I've got that.
I have all the Game Boy games.
Yeah, I've still got like pristine cartridges or boxes for those too. Like it's crazy. I don't even know why those things did not get bent, or
I should have picked those up when they got re-released, because at some point they released all 4 of those Final Fantasy games on Game Boy, which was like unheard of. Like they didn't re-release cartridges back then. But it wasn't even Nintendo. It was like, or it wasn't even Square. It was like another company.
Yeah.
That got them and reproduced them.
Yeah, at that point I was so young that I didn't even. Sorry, Jangela. At that point I was so young I didn't even know what was happening. I just had Game Boy and I just got those games, and like we traded those games between each other. Like someone got the second one, I got like the first and the third. I traded with them, but after I like had beaten the first, I think, and I gave that to them. And there was some bosses that I didn't even understand what was happening, because like if you cast Cure on them for some reason, it actually did damage, and I wasn't sure if it was doing damage or something like that, and or I'm not even sure if it was doing damage. I'm not sure if I beat them that way, but like you couldn't even tell sometimes like if things were healing or hurting people, because it was just, you know, all different types of grays. So it was fun, but like on the Game Boy it was also a little bit difficult. What I'm saying is it was a communal aspect, and you know, everybody in my neighborhood was trying to beat those games together before there was ever an internet, and I could see how that would have been even more fun if it were on a console.
I bought all 4 of those myself. I beat all 4 of those myself. I didn't need anybody's help.
How old are you?
You're a better man than I am.
How old are you?
I was 17 or 18, somewhere around there. I was around like going to college age, because I remember it was like my senior year that I bought them.
Okay.
So
yeah, see, I was like in 4th grade.
You were a small child, yes.
I beat Final Fantasy Adventure, but and Final Fantasy Legend, like those are the romancing saga games, and I've never been a fan of the saga games. So that's been consistent for me. Like the ones that we did get over here, I was like, I noped on those in a big way.
I actually liked those. I didn't like the later ones, but I liked the first 3 there. But that's just me. So anyway, that's my number 1. PlayStation 1.
That's your number 1. We should move on to our listener feedback. Over at pixelbit.com, we had a handful. Jamie, who is our fellow Pixelbit writer, his number 3 is the NES. He says, the console that started console gaming for me. Circa 1989, my older brother won $100 from his middle school for being the top honor roll student. He took that money and got the NES action set. After playing the Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt for the first time, it was the beginning of a beautiful thing. I kind of like that most people put like little story anecdotes, because I think that's a big deal, is like for all of these, like there's so many memories tied into them. His second one is the Super Nintendo. See, he did the right thing. It was the consoles I spent the most time playing with my brother. We spent countless times playing NBA Live 96, Super Mario World and Kart, Kirby's Dream Course, and our all-time favorite, Tetris Attack. But perhaps the best the best Super Nintendo moment, I hate saying SNES, was sometime in 1995 when he brought home Super Metroid and played it for the first time. We were hooked from the opening sequence to the end credits. It was an experience I just couldn't get on the Genesis. And preaching to the choir there.
Such a good game.
Best game ever made.
I mean, I put my SNES on the top 3 of all time, and I didn't even have that. I had a Genesis, so. Damn.
I don't know if anybody put the Genesis on their list. There might be somebody, but we'll have to see. There may not be any Sega systems at all mentioned. I could be wrong. Jamie's number 1 says, PlayStation, baby. To quote Angelo, it was my coming of age system. It was the first console I saved for my own money, earned from 10 weeks, shining my dad's shoes, and other chores. I had to scrimp, save, and/or trade for every game I purchased, and played each game until I could play them in my sleep. Best of all, this was the console that introduced me to JRPGs. Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy Chronicles, Star Ocean Second Story, Legend of Dragoon, and Chrono Cross. In short, the PlayStation was a system that confirmed I'd be gaming for the rest of my life. I like that too, because I think for me it was like the Super Nintendo, where I was like, this is a bigger thing than I'm not going to outgrow this. Like, this is something, that's going to stick with me. I think it was like, that first time that I beat Chrono Trigger, and like I started to get like all teary eyed, and I was like, yeah, this
is better than any movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned this, but that is my first, I still have, well, it's not the original PlayStation, but the original PlayStation that I had, I traded in for the PlayStation Mini that I still have just sitting over there in my living room right now. Like, that was the first system that was mine. And that's also kind of a big deal, too. I mean, I didn't really weigh that into my decision, but yeah, that matters.
Yeah. Yeah. Michael117, his number 3 is the Xbox 360. He says, a lot of the franchises I love to this day were ones I played on my Xbox. Mass Effect, Portal, Fallout, Red Dead Redemption, and many others. The 360 and PS3 generation was almost a decade of really great gaming. I just happen to have the Xbox. And yeah, I mean, that you can't discount that. I mean, that's the longest generation of all time. And like, and I think that's part of the reason that the 360 ended up on my list, because, you know, in those 10 years, like, just so many phenomenal games came out for it.
So yeah, but I understand like a lot of those games are good and stuff, but a lot of them weren't exclusives. I know they're maybe better ports in some cases, but like when I hear Portal, I'm like, oh damn, it was so good on PC.
Yeah, but you know me, I don't give two shits about playing games on PC. So like, you know, to me, it's like, yeah, like Portal and Half-Life 2, that was the orange box on Xbox 360 for me. Like, you know, that's how I experienced those games. And yeah, and you know, like, I'm not saying that, I mean, there were plenty of exclusives on the 360 that, you know, I love,
yeah.
But I mean, but the thing is, like, the PS3, like, the only games that I own for it are PlayStation exclusives. Like, I don't have any, like, multi-platform games on that system. It's all just stuff that was on the PS3. And as such, my PS3 collection is like 15 games, maybe, where my 360 is like 80 something. And growing. Michael 117's second is the N64. He says the N64 is where I played Zelda, where I first played Zelda and started to look at games as art. I loved Mario Kart 64, Body Harvest, good man, Turok, and all the great wrestling games that came to the Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
I love me some Body Harvest.
I almost put that on my number 3 as well instead of the SNES, but for some reason I just needed the SNES on there. Like the N64 was my second system third system after I had the, I guess, Genesis as well, but I sort of stopped playing video games while I had the Genesis for obvious reasons. Not only did I not really understand Phantasy Star or ever get it, but like there just weren't things that I realized could be played. It just wasn't advertised as well. But then when I got the N64, you know, Mario 64 and things like that, I literally threw myself on the floor the day that I got that. And I remember like that Christmas, because I was that kid on that commercial. I really think my dad gave like that commercial, or like the home video that he took to Nintendo, and you know, those commercials that they had of the kids that were opening the boxes way back in the day. Like that was me, and I could totally see myself playing all those different games like Body Harvest and stuff like that. I played like every single game possible, Clay Fighters, all those things. And it was great for what it was, but then like at the end of the life cycle, I just hated it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think, like, I was so excited for the N64 before it came out. Like, my friend Devin in high school and stuff, like, we would pass each other in the halls and just say, Mario 64 rules. And it's like before the system was even out, we were just like devouring every little screenshot and stuff. And, you know, and then we went to like Toys R Us when they had the kiosks before it came out. We would just like play it, you know, as much as we could before like some other kid had to like come up. And, you know, it's like, yeah, it came out. Mario 64 was awesome. And then nothing. Like, I bought like one game, like the first year I had the N64 after the launch, it was Doom. And that was it. I rented a couple games that didn't do it for me. And then I traded it in at Game Fellas when I discovered Game Fellas. And I was like, I'm just going to buy a whole bunch of PlayStation games. And then I bought another one when Zelda came out. But, yeah, I mean, I can understand the nostalgia for it. And I understand, especially if you're younger, like, you know, it might be one of your first consoles and stuff. It's just, of all of the systems we've mentioned so far, I think that its library holds up the least, over time. Like, it's hard to go back to PS1 games, but it's way rougher to go back to N64 games that aren't like the couple really big Nintendo ones. You know, it's like, yeah, you can go back to Smash Brothers and Zelda and Super Mario 64, you know, and I guess Mario Kart, even though I'd never liked that version. But outside of that stuff, it's like, it's rough.
And you can play most of those games on 3DS too, so.
Yeah. Michael 117's number 1 is the PlayStation 2. He says PlayStation 2 had an incredible controller, a massive library, and it was my first DVD player, which we can't discount that enough. Like, that was huge for me. Like, yeah, so many movies. The PS2 also introduced me to new genres, the biggest one being RPGs. Shout out to Champions of Norrath and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. I also played way more Keston than a person probably should. Yeah. Keston was all right. Okay, Superstep gave us like an essay, and so I'm going to paraphrase as best that I can. His number 3 console was the N64. He says, "You'd think this would be my number 1 since it was the first console of my own. My most memorable Christmas console, right there with you, Patrick. And one of my favorite games came on in the form of Star Fox 64, and it was great. But honestly, I looked at my older brother's PlayStation with some envy for more mature stuff on his console. Having said that, the N64 was pretty awesome, but if I'm being honest, I just wasn't playing the same games as everyone else. I didn't really like GoldenEye as much as everyone else did. I'm right there with you.
I'm not.
And I got tired of it always being the number one seller in Nintendo Power sales over the games I preferred or were newer. I still like the original Mario Kart more than I like Mario 64.
Yep.
And Super Mario Sunshine more than Mario 64. Oh, okay. You had me up until you said that.
Yeah. Maybe he said that backwards. Maybe he meant to say it the other way around.
I don't think he did.
I don't think so either.
He loves the flood.
And then he goes on, he says, but then like titles like Star Fox 64, F-Zero X, the 2 Zelda titles, Snowboard Kids 2. I totally forgot about
Snowboard Kids is great. 1080 snowboarding too, you know.
Yeah. Among others, those were great. I also owned Shadows of the Empire, which was way too hard for all the wrong reasons and still is.
Dude, that was one of the, for me, scariest games of the time when you had to play like underwater in the trash compactor level. That scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Because I don't even like things underwater, and you couldn't even see. It was so murky. I had to play it before school one day because like I would not play that level once I got home any day. Nope.
Man, do you guys remember that Star Wars game on the Super Nintendo though? That was real good.
No, because Dash Rendar.
What, Super Star Wars?
Yeah.
You might want to go back and look at it.
I remember renting it and thinking it was pretty good. It was hard.
At the time, like, it was, like, the graphics were amazing, the sound was amazing, and you're, like, you're playing all these different characters, but, like, you go back now and you realize it's one of the, like, most unfair games that you've ever played. Like,
But with regard to renting things, like, about Star Fox 64... You can beat that game in 3 days, like I did when I was a kid and rented it only once and beat it. I
thought you could beat it in like 2 hours or something like that.
Yeah, like I didn't even play that much, and it was done. So that was my big problem with Star Fox, and always has been.
Yeah, I remember a lot of people complaining about that when it was re-released on the 3DS because it was still like a full price 3DS game. And they were like, "You can beat this in 2 hours." Like, why is this $40?
Branching paths.
That reminds me. When did score chasing die? Like it's around like in niche qualities right now, like people who still play like shoot 'em ups and stuff like that. But like the last game I can think of where score chasing was a big factor was probably Tony Hawk.
I mean, there's like Resogun or something like that, or Super Stardust, like those things.
Geometry Wars.
Yeah, Geometry Wars.
But I mean, like as far as
Pac-Man Championship.
Yeah, those aren't like what I would think is like a big game. You know, like this is a big AAA. You buy this game, and the whole point is just to chase numbers on a scoreboard.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say that probably died with the NES generation.
No, because, I'm just thinking. I think like my whole thing was the last time I remember that being a real big deal was Tony Hawk.
Well, yeah, but like that wasn't the norm though. Like. There are still games where like score chasing is the thing, but I would say that like NES was still very much like, these games aren't complex enough to where you can do anything more than like chase a score or something like that. But then you got to like the Super Nintendo and Genesis where it's like, oh no, these have like somewhat of a story and we've got level progression and stuff like that.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, there might be a score, but that's like, it's just there because we're still not ready to remove ourselves from the arcade thing.
Yeah.
But then definitely like after that it was like, okay, why is there a score here?
I was going to say it was kind of PlayStation because I remember it being a factor for about half the games on the Super Nintendo, but then the other one was like, here's a really hard platformer with a score, but the real thing is can you get the secret levels and can you beat them, or like can you get the Chaos Emeralds, like that kind of thing.
The unlocks.
Yeah. The unlocks. This is when the unlocks kind of started to sneak their way in. You're right.
Yeah.
All right.
Super Steps number 2 is the GameCube. He says, this is the first console I owned because I paid for it. My parents paid for some of the tax and maybe for Luigi's Mansion, but I was told to scrounge up my lawn mowing money at age 11 if I wanted something as expensive as a console for Christmas. So I did.
Damn.
Mario.
Oh yeah, he said something really funny here, which was, that when he was a kid, like on the playground, like there was actually like a hardcore console war thing with kids between the Xbox and the GameCube.
Oh.
And as someone who was working retail at the time, that made me laugh out loud. Because I'm like, at the time, everybody would come in and would say, well, should I get a PlayStation 2 or an Xbox? And the GameCube would never come up unless Jack, who was our big Nintendo fanboy, would be like, well, what about the GameCube? And they're like, oh, I don't know anything about it. He's like, well, it's great. The games are fantastic. Here, check this out. And he sold so many GameCubes that way. But like, you know, it was not even in the discussion most of the time because it was just like, as far as the masses went, like it just didn't penetrate.
That's console number 2 if you want.
Yeah.
Mario.
That was the first time I saw people buying 2 consoles. Because prior to that, it was you were either Team A or Team B. You know, like when we were kids, it was people fighting over Super Nintendo or Sega Genesis. You know what I mean? But then I do remember that. I remember a friend of mine was the first person I was like, oh, right, I guess you can have 2 consoles. Like, why not? And he had an Xbox and a GameCube. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually bought the GameCube at launch, which I rarely did back then. I usually would wait a little bit, but I really wanted Rogue Squadron. And also we had the import GameCube, so like I really liked Wave Race and Luigi's Mansion, so I got those as well. But he goes on to say that the exclusives were amazing. He likes to mention that, like I pointed out, that people hated Wind Waker's look at first, but the game ended up being great. So did Metroid Prime, Mario Sunshine, and he also gives a shout out to other games like Eternal Darkness, which is one of my favorite GameCube games for sure. Rogue Squadron and Super Monkey Ball. So. I just thought it was like hilarious that was the thing. I'm not doubting him. I'm just like, I wonder if that was like a thing with other kids or if it just happened to be like his particular area. Cause like, you know, even kids would come in and like they wanted a PlayStation 2. Like maybe we weren't selling.
Maybe he influenced it too. Like he liked it so much that he was like changing people and he changed enough people where it was all of a sudden a trend.
Yeah. Yeah, because like, you know, it was like if the kids were really young, then a GameCube would usually be pretty good because of the controller and stuff like that. Like it was like, you know, it fit really well in their hands. It was like big flashy buttons and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was like PS2 all the way and then Xbox because of Halo. But and then his number 1, like this will blow you guys away, is the PlayStation 4.
Wow.
Okay. His reasoning is that he hadn't really been playing a lot of games in the last couple generations for financial reasons. But he says with the PS4, I have literally hundreds of games where I used to own less than 10 per console. The reason is that because of PlayStation Plus, online sales, like he's bought almost all of his games digitally. So that's the thing for him is, you know, like he points out that like, you know, PS Plus games, $5 to $10 blockbusters like Need for Speed that he got on sale. Or getting half off of games like Rise of the Tomb Raider. You know, so his thing is that he thinks it is like possibly the best library in a generation. And he's still looking forward to playing like some stuff that's recently gone to $20 like Until Dawn. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, like especially with me like doing kind of a 180 on the PS4 over the last few years.
That's probably like a double-edged sword for me because there's also been a devaluation of games in general, and my lack of caring about a game when I get it in general that like is sort of a problem to me in addition to being great because it's easier to get these games. So not sure what to think about it yet.
I've literally gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't even want this for free. Like, I'll see the PS Plus games for the month, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not even going to bother. Like, I don't want this. Like, it's fine. I'll just let it go. Every once in a while, I'm like, ooh, you know, like, that's cool. Like, I think, like, Day of the Tentacle remake. Like, I was like, okay, I've never played Day of the Tentacle. That's a really cool one. But sometimes it's like, I don't know. I don't even want this on my account.
Isn't that wild, though, how things have changed? It's like, you know, if somebody told us when we were kids, oh yeah, you can get this game for free. It's kind of crappy, but it's free. We'd be like, yes, give me, you know, that kind of thing. And now it's just like, oh, that game, yeah, it's okay, but it's not really worth the hard drive space. That's wild.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'll add it to my cart, but I'm not going to download it.
Right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes I won't even do that. I'm like, no, I just don't. Like for Xbox this month, it's Project Cars and some indie game that just looked like garbage to me. I was like, no, I don't even want these like showing up in my games available to download. I don't need them cluttering that list. So,
but the funny thing is, like, the bad indie games on console are nothing like the bad indie games on PC. Like, we get Twine trash. You know?
Ooh, no. Have you seen the stuff that's been getting like released on the PS4 downloaded store?
Like what?
Like Black Tiger?
Never heard of it.
Everybody who's listening to this needs to do themselves a favor and go watch some of Jim Sterling's videos on YouTube, because he's been doing like some impressions videos of some of these games. Black Tiger looks like a year one. No. It looks worse than a year one PS2 game. And it has barely cohesive English. Like it was definitely not written by someone where English was their first language. It is an atrocity. But not only did it get released on PSN, but they actually put the trailer up on the PlayStation blog and promoted it.
Wow.
And then the week after, he showed this game called Gashduin, blah blah. It was like some weird name that looks. Do you remember, Angela? You probably will, because you have you know more obscure stuff. Do you remember Art Dink's games on the PS1, like Tale of the Sun?
Yes, I remember. Tale of the Sun. Mm-hmm.
Imagine Tale of the Sun, but not nearly as charming and not nearly as nice looking, but on the PS4, and it's an RPG. It is an abomination, but it got promoted on the PlayStation blog and it got released on PSN. And it's like, is someone asleep at the wheel over there as far as quality control goes? Because they're like worst looking games I've seen in years.
Tale of the Sun was an okay game. And like you were saying, it kind of lived on its charm. You're basically telling me there's a game that's out there right now that has absolutely none of that.
And released on the PlayStation 4, for PlayStation 4 money.
And it has nothing to do with Black Tiger Sex Machine, like the EDM band or DJ or whatever.
No, you play a Black Tiger. That,
oh, wow, it's literal? It's not like some sort of like mercenary band or some crazy thing like that called... Okay, never mind.
You play a tiger and you're hunting things, but like there's... it's bad. Like just go look it up. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Lastly, over at Pixelbit, Daftman chimes in. He listens to the show all the time, but he doesn't always chime in. His number 3 is the PlayStation 4. He says, I'm really loving my PS4. Between my wife and me, it gets used all the time. So many cool games to play these days. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it before we started recording, but I would make a case that overall, I think games these days are of a higher quality than they've ever been in the past. Like even the games that like are just mediocre or poor, at least play well and look good. They're just missing some of the features that we've come, to expect from, modern game design.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like the things that the PS4 does that no other system did before, and I'm not sure if this counts, but like, because like Xbox One also does it, but this generation is maybe like the generation where apps were introduced as other optional features like Spotify or Netflix and things like that. But then there's like the Wii had some of those things. It's just that they're working in the right way now.
They're integrated better, because I mean the 360 and the PS3 had some of that stuff too, but not to the degree of the current systems for sure. His second one is the GameCube. And again, just like Super Step, he says, it's my coming of age console. And I played so many great games on it. He says, too many to mention, except for Metroid Prime, my all-time favorite. Which, not going to fault you for that.
No, I am sure that game sold consoles. Because it looked so good, and it had like no loading times. That was a really solid game. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just doors opening.
His number 1 is the Super Nintendo. He says, do I really have to justify this? The Super Nintendo was the best. Totally not being influenced by nostalgia or for my childhood or anything. So, yeah, I guess you kind of do have to justify it to us, but only because I think we all came at it from like, we need to, maybe pump the brakes a little bit on the nostalgia. But yeah, I think we set our piece on the Super Nintendo. It got plenty of love tonight. And we also have some love over at Twitter. As always, you can go to Twitter and find us at NWPcast, and you can chime in for our Stage Select and Chrono Crossing picks. Philip at PK Becker says his home consoles, and Philip is always he's like the epitome of brevity. Number 3 is the PS1, number 2 is the PS4, and number 1 is the Super Nintendo. So that's all he's got to say about that. But
all right,
but a lot of love for the PS4 from the listeners.
Yeah. I just feel like it's too early to tell for me. Like, maybe if we did this list in another 20 years, I'd go back and be like, man, the PS4 is my number 2. You won't believe, blah, 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 blah. I don't know.
Or like once I played Horizon and the new God of War.
Yeah. It's like, I need to get away from it, like, cause I still will tell people that my favorite Street Fighter is Street Fighter Alpha 3, but I'm still waiting for enough time to pass from Street Fighter 4, cause it might be Street Fighter 4 when all's said and done, but I haven't played Street Fighter 4 as much as I have Street Fighter Alpha 3. So, that's definitely a factor. Our buddy Casey at Officer Meeseeks, who is going to be going to E3. Oh, I didn't talk. Oh, well, sorry, I spoiled Consumption Junction. He says, well, first of all, you bastard, because the Nintendo DS is the best system ever. I'll fight you on that. But, his number 3 is the original Xbox, which he's the only person to say that so far. So good on you. Number 2 is the PlayStation 3.
Is it?
The original
Let
Xbox?
It go.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah. And his number 1 is the Super Nintendo. So.
Super Nintendo really ranked high for most people, didn't it?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people, yeah. JD on Twitter at a myth known as JD. He put in no special order, but I'm assuming that it's 1, 2, and 3, so I'm going to go backwards. N64, Xbox 360, and the GameCube. And GameCube makes sense because that's where Metroid Prime is, and we all know how much he loves Metroid Prime.
Oh, yeah.
And, okay, that does it for Twitter. So, thank you, everybody who contributed. That's one of the things that we love about Stage Select is getting to hear from all of you, and it's always a lot of fun, especially when you pull out stuff that we're not expecting, like the PlayStation 4. But no Sega systems.
I know.
Not a one.
Yeah.
And that's funny because I feel like there's definitely a Sega, those consoles were neck and neck when we were kids, the Super Nintendo and the we got so much Super Nintendo love and no Sega Genesis love. And I mean I think that's their strongest system.
It was like Mario versus Sonic.
That they made some better hardware further on down the line, especially with the Dreamcast. But like, as far as just, landing consoles in people's homes, the Genesis was it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
The Dreamcast had games that lived like years after like the console was dead. Phantasy Star Online.
You're absolutely right.
But
that is like the nichest of the niche, and I mean, there are actually people out there right now that are still making Dreamcast games. I'm not kidding. There was one released last year. I forget what it was called, but it was a shmup. It was a shoot 'em up. So,
but I mean, there's still people making like Nintendo and Genesis games too. Like,
yeah. My point is like there's a cool like legacy to the Dreamcast, but it just didn't have the market penetration that like the Genesis did. And I mean, freaking Sonic the Hedgehog was launched on the Genesis, and he is still around, much to a lot of our chagrins.
Ooh, Sonic Mania is going to be great. I played it.
I've heard that before somewhere.
No, this is like the regular Sonics again, except in portable form with like additional portions to the level that make it a little bit better. I think
Sonic Colors, the portable version of Sonic Colors, the portable version of Sonic Colors was pretty all right. It was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
you know what I think it is because somebody actually wrote in about this to the Giant Bombcast this week, and they're asking like, I've never played the Genesis. Like, what are some great Genesis games to pick up? And they all kind of had trouble listing a bunch of games. And I think it's just because if you're going back now and you're comparing the Super Nintendo and the Genesis libraries, like there's a ton of Super Nintendo games that still hold up to this day. And the Genesis games that were like the shit back in the day, it's like you look at them now and it's like Sonic, I think, is a perfect example. He had the attitude and like his animation was really good, but like the actual gameplay, if you hit an enemy in Sonic and you stop moving, like all of the momentum gets sucked out of that game, and like those levels where you're like having to go underwater and stuff or like stand still for moments.
Oh,
it's awful.
You're right.
I drowned so many times.
A lot of that stuff just doesn't hold up. Like, I mean, there, don't get me wrong, there's great games on that system, and I'm actually excited about building my Genesis collection because when I get my Framemeister, Like, the Genesis looks nicest on the FrameMeister of all of those machines, but it just doesn't hold up over time as much as the Super Nintendo. I just feel that history has shown that. And I think the fact that we have so many different types of gamers listening to this show and none of them mentioned it, I think people are just like, yeah, I loved it back in the day, but
and I think
that's Super Nintendo though.
I think that's true of like a lot of the game. It's really weird because so like they had RPGs on there. Sure. They had Phantasy Star, right? But you know what? The only one I think that really holds up is Phantasy Star 4.
Mm-hmm.
I think Phantasy Star 4 holds up great, but that's one game. Like,
yeah.
But Mortal Kombat had
like
blood.
4 or 5 that you could say still hold up. And that's kind of nuts.
But Mortal Kombat also looked like garbage on the Genesis. Like, I would much rather play the Super Nintendo version.
And God forbid you had to try to play it with the original controller.
What about Comic Zone?
Comic Zone is a good one.
I like Comic Zone.
Yeah, that one holds up.
Also,
I think Kid Chameleon holds up. I think Toe Jam and Earl holds up.
Gunstar Heroes.
2. Yeah. I'm not saying there's not good games on there, but...
Yeah, I'm trying to think of more. It's hard.
I
told you, Alex, kid.
No.
Did you say Crusader of Senti?
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Beyond Oasis.
Ooh, Toe Jam and Earl.
Yeah.
That's hit or miss. That depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
I'm a big Toe Jam and Earl fan.
Okay. Oh, there was a version of Rock and Roll Racing on it too.
Yeah.
Earthworm Jim.
But I was thinking more like Genesis.
Earthworm Jim.
Exclusive stuff.
That was on both systems.
Damn it.
I actually liked it better on the Genesis than the Super Nintendo. That's one of the few games.
See,
I remember the difference. I don't.
Yeah.
Did Streets of Rage 3? I don't know. Double Dragon?
Oh no, that Double Dragon's bad. All right.
Oh, the Lion King
was
good.
Yeah, the Disney stuff was good.
Yeah.
That was good on both
Genesis.
systems, though. At least the Lion King was. I think Aladdin was better on the Genesis.
Oh,
Aladdin's
yeah,
better
I had
on the
Aladdin.
Genesis.
But the Lion King was good on both of them.
Now I'm remembering games I actually had.
Yep.
Well, we need to wrap up this stage select, but before we do, it is Patrick's turn to come up with our next stage select topic. So lay it on us, Pat.
I want you to name me the top 3 games that were canceled that you wish you had played.
Okay.
All right.
That's a good one. It's funny because I was actually thinking about that the other day because I was thinking of that for a possible stage select pick for me. So I'm glad you did that one because I'm excited to do that one.
Well, I'm glad I did
like
too
fun.
because I had no other idea. On
Top 3 canceled games.
Top 3 canceled games. And as always, you can go to pixelbit.com and comment in the show thread for episode 107, or go hit us up at Twitter at NWPcast. But that's going to do it for Stage Select. Thank you, everybody who participated. We're going to roll right into some Consumption Junction.
Ooh, that made me sweat.
Okay, so I know we have some important stuff, like life-wise, to talk about for this edition of Consumption Junction. Patrick, do you want to let everybody know your tale of woe?
Well, I'm guessing you're talking about the only thing that happened to me in the last week, which was I figured out that my Nintendo Switch order was canceled by Best Buy, and I will never be purchasing a product from them again in my entire life.
Dude, that seems a bit extreme, but I feel for you.
But I also thought to myself, like, why did I ever go there in general? Like, what did they ever do for me? Why is there ever a better price? Not really. Is this a Circuit City that's about to go bankrupt again? Probably, because Amazon's always better. I should have just went through them. Maybe I should have gone to Walmart even.
I can't remember the last time I actually set foot in a Best Buy, and I hate to say that, but the fact of the matter is I just do everything online now too.
Yeah.
Dude,
Like-
I buy so much stuff at Best Buy. Like
Do you?
I game the system so hardcore.
Oh.
Cuz like I'm a rewards member, but I'm also the gamer rewards unlocked member.
Yeah.
And so I get 20% off any new game purchase. And I also get double points on like any game purchase. So I'm just getting like gift certificates left and right and discounts left and right. And like I honestly don't think they expect people like me to use it the way that I'm using, because like I never pay like full price for video games anymore. Now I mean also, but Amazon too, like because on Amazon I'll pre-order, so it's like I'm getting it both sides, because you get the 20% off if you're a Prime member if you pre-order. So yeah, it's like if I don't pre-order it, I'm Best Buy. If I do pre-order it, I'm Amazon. So I use both of them. But yeah, I go to Best Buy on the reg.
So I always either pre-order or wait till it's like $20, maybe free. So for me, there's no in between where I need that Best Buy. Maybe that'll happen with the Switch eventually, but I'm not going to go there after this, because I definitely pre-order that. And I really wish I took a screenshot or something like that, but I've never had an order that went wrong after you've ordered it. So I didn't understand that could even happen. Like it already went through their system and I saw it as my orders and now it's just gone.
How close are the Best Buys to both of you, like minutes to get there?
10?
I'm about 15 minutes away from one.
Okay, because I'm like 45, and that's probably why.
Oh yeah, if I was that far away, like I wouldn't be going there very often.
Yeah,
but
it's in
they're real
Albany,
close.
which is where I work, but at the same time, when I'm out of work, I want to get home. I don't want to hang around anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to go to the freaking mall of all things, because if I'm going to do that, it's going to be on a Friday, and no. So I hate malls to begin with. Moving on.
Well,
Best Buy.
Patrick, I feel for you for losing your pre-order, but so are you going to attempt to like stand in line at like a store that didn't do pre-orders like that night, or like are you just going to wait?
I'm just going to wait. Like honestly, I have so many games that I haven't even played, like The Witcher 3, that I need to get through before, and other games just on PlayStation 4, which is apparently the top 3 system of all time, according to viewers, and I'm going to just go with that because I have it. So I can wait on that. I've got the 3DS where I can play other games that have been re-released, like Majora's Mask, that I still want to get to for free because they're at like my library. And I do want to play those things eventually. I want to play through Oracle of Seasons and Ages completely, although I've played them a little bit. Like I can take the time to do those things now and wait for the holiday bundle or something with Mario Odyssey and 2 games of my choice, which will be like Splatoon and Legend of Zelda. So maybe it's a good thing for me, and maybe I can go like on a trip this summer because I didn't spend $700 on these video games that I don't necessarily need yet. I think it's probably in the end a great thing, but also I'm just still really pissed at Best Buy.
No, I hear you. I mean, we've all got like mount backlog, in the horizon.
But like after that
yeah.
special, after that, pun intended. But after that special we did, and after playing the Switch for 4 days, I was like, this is the only game system that I really want to play. It's so much fun for everybody that I really wish it was going to replace where my PS3 is on the other side of my PS4, in the back of my TV, where there's only spots for like 2 different systems in addition to the fight stick that I've got. So there's not like anywhere else it could go unless I take down a system. And I really haven't played the PS3 now that I've got the PS4 for a year or so, at least, even though there are games that aren't out, like Castle Crashers, that I do like to play. It's just that like people don't necessarily come over to do those things anymore. And I feel like they will for the Switch. Like I had an entire group of people who wants to have like a Switch party and stuff like that. And now we can't have one because they fucked up my pre-order. And yeah, sure, we'll still have like a party and stuff, but it's not going to be the same.
So let me ask you this. Like if you are at a store like a week after launch and there's a Switch, like just out in the wild, like what do you do? Like, do you put it in the Pokeball and run? Or do you just be like, no, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and stick to my guns and wait a few months.
Yeah, I think honestly I'm going to still wait for the bundle, and I wish I weren't, because last week I just sold a bunch of people on the system by being so hyped on it, and I still am, but it's just like, for me, not the right time anymore, and there's so many different things that I could do with that money that are better for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish it, like, if the Nintendo Ambassador Program gave me like a discount or something on the system and I had an easy pre-order, that'd be great, and I would do it. And I still believe in that system more than I believe in a lot of other systems right now, Xbox One. But it's just, like we said, the valuation of games is like such a big deal for people that are our age that it's just hard to get over when you have 50 to 60 games you haven't even touched yet.
Especially with them getting longer and longer and longer. Remember guys, like last generation when people were complaining about games that were like 7 hours long and everything? Mm-hmm. And then developers were like, okay, we're going to make them 70 hours long. What do you say to that? You'll never want to trade it in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really excited for Horizon because it's getting great reviews. If Jeff Gerstmann gives it a 5-star review, like, that's something to take notice of, because that man is impossible to please. And
that's interesting. Like,
but it's like a 50-hour long game, and it's like I wasn't prepared for that. Like, I'm not ready to commit to a game that huge, but it's my birthday gift to me.
I'm not ready to be that hyped in that game yet either, because I guess I took special note of like the negative reviews and thought, like, what do I really dislike about games that are common in general, and like people for some reason keep coming back to and saying, oh yeah, that's just the way games are and things like that. And it's like the fetch quests and the side quests that artificially add a bunch of hours to the games that I think Horizon is doing, now that I've read a lot about it. And it's just like, I was so hyped about that game, and now that I'm not getting the Switch and not playing Breath of the Wild right away, and I did play the first 20 minutes of Breath of the Wild, know how different it is every single time you play it. I'm just like Horizon's like Witcher versus probably Final Fantasy 15 for a lot of people, which I'm also still playing because there's like a season pass and stuff, and it's still getting better. It's just, there's a lot I heard to do with the side stories that don't make sense versus like the entire story as a whole, which is great. I heard like the plot, and if you like expository cutscenes, like it's amazing for people because there's like just long-winded explanations about why things are happening. And you know I love that stuff, but there has to be like a reason I'm doing all the other side quests and things like that I'm just really hesitant on being like really excited about a first-party game from PS4 at this point, because it's been so long like that I've seen innovative quests and just general ideas that are new in a game, such as like an action RPG. I know what it's going to be, and I know I'm going to have fun, but I know it's going to be something I've already done before.
But I gotta call you out on that, because like it wasn't too long ago that you were extolling the praises of Final Fantasy 15.
I know,
which has the most rote and repetitive side quests, arguably, of anything that's come out in the last couple of years. So
what do you mean?
You know, you're literally just, you talk to the person, you go do the thing, and you go back to the person. But you're doing it over like a vast empty world over and over and over, and literally turning in the quest only to have a new quest immediately pop up from that same person. So I don't know about you, but I got into a loop where it's like, I have literally just gone back and forth between this guy 6 times over this entire evening, and I've done nothing else.
No, you're right. And maybe to an extent, maybe it was because that was like the first time I had done it in a while, and it felt like still great to do those things. But like, how many hours can you do that, and how many different games can you do that in before you just are burnt out on it? And you may have been burnt out on it before me or something like that. But in addition to the Final Fantasy hype and, you know, just me in general being hyped for things that I get, it was easy for me to overlook those things. I still love the quest that I did, and I think it's a little more than that. Like, they give you a general area you have to go to. Sometimes you don't exactly see where the destination is once you get there. So there's like not looking on the mini map at the very end. You're looking in the real world, because there's like a small semicircle in the entire overworld where it could be. You don't know the pinpoint of it. Those things, to me, make it a little bit better. And maybe Horizon does that kind of stuff too, but I don't know. It's just, I'm going to play through The Witcher first and other things that I already have before I spend any more money on like a new system or game now. And it's also probably because that event that I was at last weekend was so positive and so amazing. Like it's really hard not to come down from it and be depressed after you're not in that kind of atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, like I obviously haven't played Horizon yet, but like, yeah, just from what I've seen of gameplay and what I've heard people talking about, like, because, it may have some of those open world issues that I have with a lot of open world game design right now, but it seems like at least the moment to moment gameplay is at such a high quality that it might be like a Saints Row 4 thing for me, where it's like, okay, this is like a rinse and repeat quest thing, but I'm having so much fun minute to minute that it doesn't matter. So, I'll have to wait and see, but like, for me, it's like, I am really excited for that game, so I am going to pick it up, but I'm going to try to power through Last Guardian. I haven't started it yet, but I want to play through that this weekend.
Wow.
Before Horizon comes out. Cause Last Guardian's supposed to be about 10 hours, so I can do that.
Yeah, see, that's a lot to do for me because in addition, I'm making my own app right now, and that's taking up a lot of time with the graduate school classes. And like when I play games, I've only got maybe a half hour to an hour a day, in addition to like how many hours do I have per week before I start like not getting my assignments in and things like that. And like I played like 1 hour this entire week on Street Fighter today beforehand to try to unlock a new character, and I did get Uri in finally, but now I've got 3 out of the 6 and I haven't even played that much. And I got a fight stick for that game even, and I could just keep doing that, and I can keep doing Overwatch with the Fall League coming out. Like I'm pretty close to memorizing all those maps and knowing most of the characters, so why not keep going with those things? Like it's hard to just stop this entire generation and start something new.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, it's just for me, like there's certain, like I know I'm going to be buying fewer games this year overall because I've just planned on that. But there are certain games where it's like I'm going to have to play that, and Horizon's one. Yeah, obviously Mass Effect is one.
Neo,
South
maybe.
Park is another.
Nier is one.
Which one?
Nier.
Nier is one for Angelo.
Neo, I was thinking of playing. I don't know.
Neo does look really good.
It does, but I've got Dark Souls 3 and I haven't played it, so right. I'd probably play that first. Like going along with what Patrick said.
See, what I'm trying to do is go to my DePaul Public Library. I think it's public. Everybody can really go. They don't really check. But what they have is like a section where there's a bunch of great video games that are for PS4, PS3, 3DS, like Majora's Mask 3DS, which I can just rent and play for free. Why wouldn't I do that first? Like I didn't ever really complete that game because of Tingle, and now there's an internet to get me through those sad parts where he's just like flying around me and I can't do anything about it. Like I want to do those things as well, and I could play, like I said, Oracle of Ages and Seasons because they're already on my 3DS in the meantime, and wait for those other things to go down a little bit. I feel like I'm turning into Angelo, where like every game that I play is from the last generation.
Oh,
like
yeah.
That was probably like a year or two ago when you kept saying like, yeah, I'm not even like current on the generation yet. Like I'm just buying everything bargain bin right now, and it's amazing. Like I feel great for doing it,
Yeah, because Angela, you haven't even like other than Grand Kingdom, like you haven't been like, really going hardcore on your PS4 yet. Like you've still been.
I've been playing a game though on my new gaming computer. It's a 10-year-old MMO.
You got your new laptop.
Yeah.
Wait, an MMO?
Yeah, a 10-year-old MMO that I've been soloing, and I don't know what the heck I'm doing with my life right now.
What are you playing?
Tera.
Tera?
Yeah.
I played Tera for like 3 days.
Dude, I think that's where it's going to end for me too. Like, I literally think today I was just like, I think I've experienced everything I'm going to experience and enjoy in this game. And I'm just in the loop now, and the loop is just going to repeat. So I think I literally think I just hit that wall today. But it was one of those things where, like, for a good solid 3-4 days, I was playing this game. Because unlike a lot of MMOs, it's actually kind of like action oriented, kind of.
Yeah.
And I think that was what kind of set it off for me, if that makes sense, because like a lot of MMOs are just, and I push button 1, and I push button 5, and then move the mouse over here a little bit. 7. Oh, 1's clear again. Let's hit that. You know, and it's not fun.
Set those hotkeys.
But this is, well, that's what I'm talking about, like the hotkeys 1 through 0. This one is because it's like it's like a action MMO RPG, I guess. You have to dodge roll. The character I was playing is a gunner. So you have a dodge roll, and a rocket jump that you can use to get out of the way, essentially. And I mean, I kind of love how ridiculous the game is, but you know, that only lasts for so long. Like,
Yeah.
there's things about this game that are, so here's the thing. Okay. The art style is, unique. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
So hold on. Let me start with the environments are freaking gorgeous. Like you will go riding through a forest and look up and there'll be like this canopy of trees and all this other stuff. Then there's the characters, and they are all, both male and female, like, let's expose a bunch of skin.
Well, but like, has the community not just evolved into furry on furry action all the time?
It's like weeb fest in there. It's crazy. it's freaking all anime people.
What's a weeb?
People who are like way too into Japan and anime and stuff. And that's funny. What's funny about it is it's actually Korean. It's not Japanese, but whatever. The other thing is they kind of went with the Dead or Alive style physics on the female characters, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I do.
And
I remember.
Here's the funny thing. Like, they are committed to this. Like, way too committed to this. I had a glitch one time where I talked to somebody and they spun around and their boobs caught up like a minute later. Like, they just swung all the way around. It was really funny. But like, even if like, you know, it kind of makes sense if you're wearing like cloth armor, but like full plate mail will have like, it's ridiculous. Like in full plate mail, this is still happening. I'm like, how? How is this? It's absolutely nuts. So, I mean, there's comedy in that, to me anyway. Like, it's not going to drive me wild. It's going to make me I just laugh. Like, it's hilarious.
So are you just like getting into MMOs now with the PC?
No.
Like, you know about the new Morrowind expansion to the Elder Scrolls, right? How about that?
I saw that. And I don't know. If anything's going to get me to play Elder Scrolls, it's going to be that. But one of the things about Tera is it's free to play. And I do need to talk about that because some adjustments need to be made in how they're handling this. So here's the thing. If you're going to do your free-to-play MMO, how would you... let me just throw this question to you guys. Free-to-play MMO, you need people to throw in money, right? So you'd be like, we're going to give you mounts, we're going to give you perks, we're going to give you this. What would be your price point on those things?
$1.
I mean, it depends on what it is. Like, if we're talking about like a character slot, I could probably see paying like a $5 thing for that,
Sure.
like, you know, one-time thing. You know, if we're talking about a mount, I mean, I guess it depends on how rare the mount is. Like,
Yep.
maybe $2 to $10 depending on how rare the mount is.
So I went looking for mounts. And they, you know, it's like any other MMO, you have to buy their currency, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. And I was like, oh, that mount looks really cool. It's got wings and crap. How much is that one? Are you ready? $75 US
Ooh.
for a mount.
It's like Star Citizen.
Guys, I had my credit card out. I was ready to give you like $5, $10, $15, whatever. You know, give me a mount and let me. Oh, and that was the other thing too. Was like you had to buy their currency. So the mount was. I think the mount was $70, and their currency is like $50, and then the next tier was $100. So like I would either have to buy like multiple things of this currency or spend $100 on this game to get one. I ended up not buying anything because it's all ridiculous. And I'm like, I seriously was looking for a way to give these people money because I played the game for like 3-4 solid days, right? And I still feel like I need to, but I also don't see where I could give them what I feel like I
mean, personally, you could feel happy about getting away from that game.
Like, I want to put money in the tip jar, but this isn't a tip jar. You know what I'm saying?
Like, I was gonna, like, so, I mean, okay, so that's a $70 mount, but, like, is there a $10 mount? Is that just, like, the super duper mount? Because, I mean, World of Warcraft has some mounts that are, like, over $100, but then they've got mounts that are way cheaper.
What do they do?
They're just I have spent most of their stuff. I didn't find anything that was under like $30. Now, I didn't spend a whole lot of time looking because I was specifically looking at what I wanted to get, which was like a mount. And like some of the other stuff, like some of the more aesthetic stuff doesn't make much of a difference to me, but I want something that makes like a gameplay difference. And it was just, I don't know. And their offerings were kind of weak. Like it was maybe a dozen of these and a dozen of these. And I don't know, man. I don't know where they're making their money. I mean, I saw people flying around on these mounts, so people are buying them, but it's just like, I'll tell you some of the crazy stuff that can happen in this game. Like, I'm just running down a field on my horse, and I look up, and there's a pig flying through the sky with somebody on its back. Dude jumps off the pig, just lands, kills a few things, flies off on the pig. And I'm like, I need to support this somehow. Like, the world needs more of this.
Flying pigs.
Flying pigs with people that just like make them disappear midair and hit the ground and land on enemies. It's great. It is a mechanically fun game, especially the bosses are fun because what it'll do is like when you turn on, you have to go through like the options and tweak it a little bit. But like when the boss is winding up for an attack, it lights up the area where that AoE is, where that area of attack is going to be, and you have to dodge roll or get out of the way. Like it's very, you can't, like, you're not just snoozing and pushing buttons and waiting for something to happen. Like, it's very active. At the same time, like, there's nobody, I can't get anybody to play this game. So, I'm probably done, but I kind of really want to slip them like a 10 spot for just like, hey, thanks for the good times for the past week, you know.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like I get that because I like to do that too. But if it's a case where you played it for 3 days and they don't have any reasonable thing for you to buy for that amount of, because that's still, when you think about like the way people play MMOs, 3 days is nothing.
I know.
So if like you literally just got in there and like wet your toes, I would say like, peace out, guys. Like it was real. Because I mean, that's why they make it that way. Like there's people that are going to just pay nothing. But clearly, like, they probably have a type of fan base where, like, I don't want to generalize, but I'm going to say that probably don't have to spend a lot of money on significant others and stuff like that, so they can spend it on Tera. Just going to say maybe that's a possibility.
Like, there's an animation where my character will, like, mine for resources, and then when she's done, she'll put her fist up in the air. Just like a fist pump, and they move for like a good solid 2 seconds. That's the audience they're going for.
Real big boobs, real big.
They're not even that big. That's what makes it funny. And she's wearing plate mail. So
I wish you could come in with us on Final Fantasy 14 because I've been playing that a little bit more lately, but it's got the monthly fee.
Yeah, it does.
I love that, and like the samurais the samurai class that's coming out, and Heaven Sword. Actually, I haven't even gotten to play yet. I'm really excited to get back in at some point, but I'm not sure when there's enough content for me to want to spend money again, and who I'm able to convince to play with me at the same time. It's just the same problem with a free-to-play MMO is also a problem with a pay-to-play MMO. People realize how much of a big time investment it is, and it's just hard to get that community started around yourself if you're not already in it.
Well, and especially with 14, my big complaint continues to be the fact that it's not very social. It's like you can do so much on your own or just with a couple people. And that's the way I've been playing it. I only play with my friend Shanna, and we play at very specific times. Right. And that's really it. I'm not playing on my own too much. What I did end up playing in the last couple of weeks is fired up a new game of Mass Effect 1, started a new Shepard, who I based off of Mahershala Ali. Is that his name? The guy who plays the bad guy on Luke Cage, Cottonmouth. That guy is like just a really badass looking dude, and I made my Shepherd based on him and got pretty close, actually. He looks really good. But this was finally, though, this is like my 6th or 7th time playing Mass Effect, and I think it's a little too much, or maybe it's still too fresh in my head, because I was like, all right, I'm going to critical path this, so I'm not really doing a lot of the side quests, which means I'm not talking to a lot of people, and I'm just kind of like zooming through it, but because of that, I'm not getting a lot of the dialogue, because I'm not talking to people, and that's so much of Mass Effect, like trying to role play my character and decide what he's going to say, even though I've heard it all before. So I went ahead and put it down. I played it for about a good solid 7 hours and decided, no, you know what? Like, I don't want this that fresh in my memory before Mass Effect Andromeda comes out, because I have finally come to grips with the fact that that game is not doing what I love about Mass Effect, and I just have to accept that and move on. Not saying I'm not going to play it. I'm going to play it. It's just, I've now embraced the fact that this is no longer a role-playing game. This is an action game with some tech trees in it, and that's about it.
And
it's
Natalie
much a role-playing
Dormer.
game. Yeah, I don't really care about her.
As long as we're talking about body armor and guarding and body armor guards and stuff like that, I was playing the game For Honor, and after I played it on the open beta, I saw that people were like, this is female body armor done right. And I was like, but this is game mechanics done wrong. I don't know. A lot of people are saying it's like great and stuff. And I was just like playing it on the beta. It was like, there was R1 and R2, and there was a few different ways to use that. And coming from different games that have 20 to 30 mechanics that you learn, it was just like, yeah, it was the greatest melee combat system, I guess you could say, but that's because there was 2 buttons instead of 1, and I guess there's like superpowers you could use, and maybe I'm just guessing there has to be something else besides the beta that I played, and there's like different random henchmen that come behind you and help you out, and you're supposed to help them, but they're all more or less Dynasty Kings, and it's like, I never wanted to play that game ever. I don't know why.
I mean, but like the whole like parrying and defending and stuff like that, like when you're playing against somebody that knows what they're doing, seems like really, like it seems like you're doing some actual like sword combat,
I guess,
instead of just hammering on buttons.
Yeah, it's more like, it's like chivalry, except if it's like really polished. But I could only play chivalry for like 20 minutes before I was like, I'm just killing people for no reason, and it's fun with my friends or something like that, but I really don't want people to waste their lives that way.
Well, there's a lot of people that like that. I heard a lot of positive feedback about that thing. So
I wanted to be positive too. Like, I was really happy about it when I saw it at E3, and it's just like there's not enough game for me. I hate to compare everything to Overwatch, but like once I've played Overwatch, it's so hard when there's only a few maps and a few different things to do. Like, even,
but that's Overwatch too.
But it's not. Yeah. It's not.
No, but if we're talking about things to do, like Overwatch is like a handful of maps, and like, well, when it started, it was like one mode.
I think he's talking more about like how it appeals to him rather than the actual games, like comparing them. Maybe I'm wrong.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Overwatch has the style and like the character to it, but if we're just talking like features and stuff, like I would say they're probably equally sparse.
Then you need to go back, man. I mean, there's like 20 something different characters, and each one of them is different. And like there's 3 classes, and they're pretty much all the same to me. Maybe I didn't play it enough, but
no. But I'm not talking about characters. I'm talking about things that you do. You attack, you defend. Then they have the arcade mode now. Like that's not a lot. Like I'm saying it's not good, because it's a fantastic game. Like it's always fun, but like that was a big complaint of like even fans of the game. Like they were like, this literally has like a fraction of what I'm used to in a multiplayer shooter.
Right, and they've added more since then, like capture the flag and like the May snowball fight. They've done Lucio Ball. They've done things like that, and I don't see how For Honor could ever add different arcade modes like that, or just new characters in general, new classes and things like it. like it's like if Overwatch launched with only 3 different characters that everyone had to be, and then placed different AIs in those same maps, and all the maps looked like they were medieval and the same to me. I need to play it more maybe, but like through the beta and the tutorial that was a little bit too slow for me. I was like, I'm really glad that I didn't buy that game.
I mean, maybe it's just not for you, man. I mean, there's also that. It could be a great game that's just not a Patrick game.
It's possible.
Yeah, I was interested in that game, but with it being mainly online, like I'm not going to play it. Like if they make a single player game with those mechanics, I'm all for it, because I think that melee combat looks really interesting, and I've talked about it on the show before, but it definitely harkens back to like an idea I had for like a combat mechanic for a action game like that.
But I think your combat mechanic is so much more involved than I felt for For Honor, and maybe that's like after you've told me in depth about what your idea is for a melee game, I just felt like there could have been so much more. Maybe they streamlined it too much for me during the tutorial / my first couple matches, but after that I was just done, and I'm glad that I got to play the beta.
Yeah. I think those are really good to have. And I guess apparently there's been like some problems with the fact that like there's no dedicated servers. It's just peer to peer. So, people are getting kicked from matches and stuff a lot, and that's not great. What is great is that I did procure my ticket to E3, guys.
Nice.
So I will be returning to E3 for the first time in 7 years.
This is where the Final Fantasy victory fanfare kicks in.
Yeah. They actually didn't sell out as quickly as I thought they would, because Casey from Pixelbit, he got his a few days after me, and they were still available. So he's going as well. He apparently only lives about an hour away from LA. So we'll probably hit the show floor together. If anybody's listening and they're going to E3, definitely let me know, like either in the comments or hit me up on Twitter, and we'll try to get together or something, because I am fully expecting this E3 to be a continuation of what I experienced in 2010, which is to say that you two will probably get more of E3 sitting at home and watching stuff online than I will actually being there. Just because like you wait in line forever, and then you get to watch the developers run through a 10-minute demo, and then you walk out of the theater and move on. But it's still the energy of the place, and I'm excited to see if they're going to do different things, knowing that there's going to be 15,000 like regular people going to it. So that's going to be really cool. And, we'll definitely be recording some E3 specials. I mean, if anything, Casey and I will just record stuff in my hotel, but we'll probably try to get at least Angelo and Patrick in for one of them for sure, and maybe some other guests the rest of the week, because that's what we do every year.
Yeah, I'll definitely be down for those again. And I was just thinking, like, is there any way you can say you're like media? Like, I'm surprised you can't get a super media pass with all we've done on this show and Pixelbit in general. Like, you're definitely hitting the threshold as far as followers and the influence, I feel, compared to different things I've seen at Nintendo. And they've streamlined things so much at the Nintendo only gig that I did that I feel E3 might even be better than you realize. So hold out hope,
Well, getting in as media or anything like that, or even trying to just get in as like a regular pass, like in the past, like you need to have proof of income. And since I'm doing this for free, like I don't have a tax ID or anything to provide. So because you need to provide 2 forms of identification to get in. And so I can say like, hey, here's my work over at Pixelbit, but I don't have like my tax form saying like, here's my W-2 from Pixelbit. This is how much money I made from Nerds Without Pants last year. So I'm missing that part of it. So that's why I couldn't get in, just as that. But my badge does say Nerds Without Pants on it. I went ahead and put that, like when they put company, like I went ahead and did that. So it says Julian Titus Nerds Without Pants. So,
nice.
And the thing about E3 that, if you're listening and you've never been before, just be prepared for classism at its best, because what everybody does at E3, no matter who you are, is you start to talk to somebody, and the first thing they do is look at your badge to see if you're worth their time. It's like, if you're an exhibitor, like you get priority. If you're media, you're one below that. And then I'm sure like just the normies like me now are like bottom of the totem pole. So just expect to be pushed around a lot.
Yeah, and if you're a girl, like you're on top of everything.
Not necessarily.
No, I mean, that's what I heard for like exhibiting in general. Like you can't be one of the people who is demoing things unless you are like a hot chick at E3.
Oh, but people aren't going to talk to that person and like be like, oh yeah, like I need to talk to you. It's like, oh, you're the Nintendo girl that's attached to the Nintendo Switch. Cool.
Oh,
you know,
so in
I wish
some
you
ways,
weren't tethered to this thing.
Yeah, in some ways you're at the bottom, I guess. Then.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just you're paid to demo something. So, yeah, that's about it for me. The only other thing that I got up to is that I've been doing the blog a day thing over at Pixelbit this month, and I've actually kept up with it. I'm almost, we're almost done. It's like, every weekday of February you do a blog, and I've done 18 of them so far. We're almost done, but one of the guys at Pixelbit has been just showcasing his Wii collection, because I think he has every Wii game. And so he'd just been like showcasing bits and pieces of them every time, and I was like, damn it, that reminds me that like now's the time to get Wii games. So I bought some Wii games. Damn. Angela, you'll appreciate this. I picked up Pandora's Tower.
Nice.
Brand new. I got a used copy of Last Story, which hasn't come yet. And then I picked up a new copy of Little King's Story, which is a fantastic little RPG / like kingdom sim. It's really adorable. I bought it for my friend Joe for a gift a long time ago, and I just never bought it for myself.
I keep forgetting about that game.
It's good. It's really good.
Good.
And I pre-ordered Breath of the Wild for Wii U because I was getting worried. I was afraid it might be another GameCube Twilight Princess situation.
I saw recently that they sold out of copies at certain places. Like I
just got a copy
anymore.
Recently, so it's out there. You can find it. We found it on Amazon. We didn't have any trouble at all.
Yeah. So there might be some places that are having trouble though. So I just wanted to make sure that I nipped it in the bud, because if I do buy a Switch, it's probably not going to be for at least a year or so, and I do want to try Zelda. And then the other thing, which I'm super excited about, I haven't played it yet, and this will speak to Angelo. And I have to thank my friend and listener to the show, James Kalunga, because he's the one who told me this even exists. But I picked up for 3DS River City Tokyo Rumble, which is a Kunio-kun game for the 3DS. And this is actually, I think, the first time that they've ever actually referred to the character as Kunio. Because like in River City Ransom, it was like very generic names. Same thing with Crash and the Boys. So, if you liked those games, this looks like it's that, but for 3DS, and I'm excited.
So River City Ransom, but you don't know what the word Kunio means?
It's the name of the character in Japan. And they refer, because that art style, they did a ton of games on like the NES and Super Nintendo. There was River City Ransom, which I think they call it like Hot-Blooded Family or something like that in Japan. Like it's
like Hot-Blooded, but it has something to do with like School-Age Kid or something like that. I think that's what it means. Yeah. But there was Super Dodgeball was one of the games in that series too. Super Dodgeball, and they did some of those for Super Nintendo as well. Crash and the Boys, which I don't know what they called that in Japan, but so you had that squatty art style. Like all the games had that same character design from River City Ransom. Okay. But yeah, the character's name was Kunio, and so they've been referred to as the Kunio-kun series, because they're not really connected by anything other than that art style, really. But there's actually a really good Retronauts episode where they go through all of that stuff and connect them all together and explain like how this is a Kunio game, but this one isn't, but it's got the same art style and stuff like that. So yeah, that's really about it. Anybody else have anything before we move on? No.
Angelo's ready to get to bed.
It's late.
Yeah, no, I wish I did, but I've been so burnt out after playing games for money that I can't do it for free anymore.
All right, well, that means that it's time for Chrono Crossing, so let's cue that music. and we will try to finish this edition of Nerds Without Pants before the Y2K bug destroys this laptop. Remember that? Remember that, guys?
Did I tell you what I did?
What?
I went down. So at my parents' house, I ran down to the basement, and at midnight, I hit the main breaker.
Oh my god.
The silliest thing. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I listened to everybody freak out, and they're out in the country. Like, they had no idea. Like, you know, if you're like so, you know, it's not like they could just look out their window and see, oh yeah, everybody else in the cities got their lights on, everything's fine. Yeah. So it was just a fun little thing, and then it didn't take long for them to figure it out. But
the funniest thing to come out of the whole Y2K thing for me was Iron Man's comic at the time had a storyline where Tony Stark forgot to Y2K proof his armor, and he got struck by lightning at midnight, and the armor became sentient. And it was a cool story as far as like the armor like falling, like basically like deciding that Tony was something that the armor loved and wanted to protect, but in doing so was trying to kill Tony. But the fact that like Tony Stark, you know, billionaire industrious playboy, forgot to Y2K proof like
Right.
the thing that he's like inside of on a daily basis, I thought was hilarious.
well, the other part of that is it only would have affected like older systems, like old mainframe applications that are still running, stuff that was built like pre-Windows 95, 98. Like, I am pretty sure whatever's running that suit is a little more modern than like a 70s mainframe. Just going to throw that out
Just
there.
a bit.
So,
Just a bit.
yeah.
Well, as everybody figured out, we are Chrono Crossing back to the year 2000. And, so here's the thing, like, cause last episode, I had asked everybody to like count the number of games they played that year. I just realized after looking at the Wikipedia page a little more closely that they don't actually list every single game that came out that year. You have to dig a little deeper for that, but it's still pretty good for our purposes. There weren't nearly as many games that came out this year compared to 2001. I guess it's because, you know, the PS2 launched this year.
Yeah.
And the Dreamcast was still very new. And then the PlayStation was starting to ramp down. So I guess that makes sense. But I only ended up playing about 40 games this year compared to like the 75 that I played in 2001.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's not just me, because I was looking through it. I like the first 20 games, I only played one. And I think throughout the whole list, I saw like 15 to 20 games total that I played this year. And that was down from 74 or something the year.
I played 19, I think. Not give or take, I don't know, a couple. Because I'm not sure if I got that one right exactly. But I think I played about 19 games.
Yeah. And, you know, it was a good year, but I feel like this one is pretty easy. So we'll probably run through this pretty quickly.
You have no idea.
Was it difficult for you, Patrick?
You just have no idea what game I'm going to pick.
Well,
I think I do.
There were really good games this year. I mean, this was Chrono Cross. This was, you know, a lot of the really good late PlayStation games were coming out. Mm-hmm. PC had a real good year, too. Quake 3 and, yeah.
PC did have a good year.
It did.
What was your game, Patrick?
The Longest Journey.
The Longest Journey?
The what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a point-and-click adventure.
Oh, that's why I didn't play it.
You might know
Is this real?
No, you might know it as Dreamfall.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's the sequel.
I've heard of Dreamfall.
Dreamfall, and then I think there's a sequel to that, like Dreamfall: The Longest Journey. But this is basically the only point-and-click adventure that I finished, and also had really big trouble with. I needed friends, one friend to come over and help through, and I'm not sure how he figured out some of the inane side quests with me, but the plot was amazing. And as I read over it again, I realized that, like this is the game I probably spent the most time in that year over, you know, even Majora's Mask, which is something, something that I never ended up finishing. But this came out in the US in November of 2000. So I think it qualifies since it was the first time I was able to get it. It came out somewhere else in 99, I just saw, but I don't think that counts because I could never have played it. It's a great plot that takes place with like a protagonist named April Ryan, who's like one of the best female characters in video games, according to people.
People Magazine, Woman of the Year 2000.
Yeah, no, she's right up there with Alex. And it's awesome because she wakes up in a world that's entirely been taken over by technology, and yet she finds like that she's been related to this other world that is entirely fantasy, and it's about the two worlds colliding. And it was at a time for me that not only was I thinking about like I wish fantasy would come in the real world, but also like how could these ever coexist? And then I like played this point and click adventure, which was mostly like the gameplay mechanics were new to me since I hadn't played many point and click adventures, but also it was just like a way for me to get through and understand things about maybe myself through like what I wanted to see in the world that wasn't there. And so like she has a coming of age at the same time, and she's attacked by a thing called a chaos vortex, and she awakens and like thinks that she's in a nightmare, but she wasn't really in a nightmare. It happens. And so over the course of what seemed to me like 30, 40 hours in this point and click adventure, because I couldn't figure out some of the side quests, or not side quests, but like the little things that you have to pick up in the random parts of the UI. It took a really long time, but I also got to think about just fantasy versus technology in general, and that was probably the first main time that I had realized those two worlds could coexist or could be existing at the same time, and I'd never seen the other, and like there could be portals to other worlds, and that was before I ever played Portal. So it was a lot to me to think about, and I even have like a history of adventure games book that's like over 1,000 pages, mostly due to that game, just because I wanted to read about the games that came before it and influenced it. And I know that there's like a sequel and a second sequel that hasn't, I think, even been fully released yet, but I could be wrong on that because I hadn't followed it as much since it went on to the 360 and other systems that I didn't have as much as like a Windows XP PC. And for me, during those XP times when I couldn't play all the games and I just got like one from a friend for free, that was when a free game actually meant something to me, and I put a lot into it. And not only that, but it was also one of the top rated PC games of the year. So when I saw that right up there, I was like, I need to make a mention of it and tell people about it who haven't played it, especially people that are listening on like a podcast like this, and people like you guys who like point and click adventures that, like you said, Day of the Tentacle, but may not have played The Longest Journey. It's the reason why I played Siberia after it, but also the reason why I didn't like Siberia as much as it. So, yeah.
Well, I was not expecting that at all, Patrick. No. So kudos to you. You threw me for a loop.
Gotcha. I did not even know you were into point and click adventures. That's a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I played Tera point and click games. So I'm like a King's Quest guy and a Space Quest guy. And real quick, not to get off of on a tangent, but like I always wanted to play Phantasmagoria, but I couldn't because I was a kid, and like that game was, just crazy adult. And so I started watching a Let's Play of it on YouTube. That is one effed up point and click game. Like I can't believe Roberta Williams like came up with that.
What happens?
So it's like this couple move into this house and it's obviously haunted, but it's like the first thing that you see is like the woman having like pretty close to like, Skinamax level of knocking boots with her husband before anything happens. And it's like uncomfortably long. It's like, okay, she's making out with her husband. All right, her negligee just came down. That's a lot of side boob. That's some grinding. Is this over? No, it's still going. Oh, okay. It's still going. Oh, all right. And then the game starts and it's like, it seems like a pretty traditional, point and click. It's digitized graphics on top of like VGA style backgrounds, but it's just like a lot of the stuff just seems like it just goes on a little too long.
Then you get to the end and you're like, wait, that's my side boob.
I had a friend whose wife was like a real conservative like type person, not the type you would expect. She absolutely loved that game. I was like, wow, okay. All right.
Like is this like Leisure Suit Larry or?
No,
through the lenses of Doom.
I was going to say it was actually kind of like, a horror movie of the era would be, except without a good editor.
Yeah. And you're still like picking up random items and trying to interact with other random things to make things happen in that classic point and click way. But yeah, especially Sierra. Angelo, what was yours? Mine is super obvious. Like, so we'll do you next. And
mine's probably pretty obvious too. It was part of the PC year for me, I suppose. Too. Deus Ex was the game that I got way into.
It's actually not obvious. I only played Deus Ex on like the PS2 briefly, so tell me about it, because I've never played the PC version.
This is the PC. I mean, I never played it on the other system, so I don't know. I mean, it's mouse driven. It plays like a first person game, so you move the mouse, you move your eyes. But I had never. It took me a minute to sort of figure out what the game really was, and that was kind of like one of the cool revelations. Was just like, oh my gosh, this is like an RPG, like an action RPG, but it's like a future first person. I don't know. Like, it was a really crazy, unique thing at the time, and it still kind of is, because kind of like how Mass Effect 1 got away from what made it like so hardcore, I guess. The later Deus Ex games definitely did that as well. Like this first game, if you tried to shoot somebody, you had to wait for like your cursor to shrink down slowly for you to get a good enough bead on them for you to make that shot. But the more you did it, the better you got at it. It was pretty cool. I really enjoyed it. And halfway, like you start to feel really powerful, especially even just after that first mission in the Statue of Liberty sort of museum, when you get your head around what the game is, what the game expects you to do, and you start to just realize just how crazy you can make stuff. Like just the wild sort of things that you can make happen in that game. That is one thing where I think we've kind of upped the ante in that regard, of just like the amount of things you can do. But even back then, this is 2000. Nothing like this had been done before. And, while we have scaled up, this game is, man, I feel like I use the word pioneering way too much on this episode, but this was a pioneering game where it introduced a whole lot of these concepts, and they were refined to an extent later. Although I still find myself enjoying the sort of progression from absolutely nothing to getting proficient versus now where you start. It feels like now they start the character with, well, yeah, he knows how to handle a gun. Of course he knows how to handle a gun. So he's a little bit better at like aiming down sights and firing at people. I don't know. There's just something about building something from scratch that way that just still feels really good. Kind of a bear to get the original to play. I still have it on disc somewhere, though. Not my original copy, but I do have it.
That's great. I wonder if it's one that holds up, or if it suffers from that like 2000 era of games where it's a little bit difficult to go back to.
It's a little ugly.
Yeah.
But like from a gameplay perspective, like I understand that it's going to have a certain look, but like games right around like 2000 to like 2003, I'd say have kind of like there was definitely like a change going on in game design where people were trying out a lot of different things and seeing what stuck. And so some of those games were a little tough to go back to.
It is a little clunky. And you know what? I haven't tried to go back to it in at least 10 years. So that'd be an interesting experiment to try out, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if I will. I don't know if I can get that thing to run on Windows 10.
But, I mean, for years after it, I had friends that were talking about how things happen in that game, and you can use the environment in ways that you can't in any other game. So I could totally see how that's the best game of the year.
You really can. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, I don't want,
Someone's got to say it.
someone's got to say it, and it's obviously going to be me. It's Final Fantasy IX.
Okay.
Like, I was looking down the list and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, and I even tried, like, well, maybe it's going to be something else. No, it's Final Fantasy IX. Like, especially for me being such a fan of the early Final Fantasies and that being literally like the swan song of the original development team, saying, hey, we're going to get in here and take one last bow. We're, same musician, same character designer, same director, and just make this beautiful little RPG that harkens back to a generation of Final Fantasies that apparently people didn't appreciate at the time because that game was super unpopular with people that loved Final Fantasy 7 and 8. And, as I've said before, I was banging my head on the counter at Game Fellas, just like trying to explain to people why this game was fantastic, and just, they were not having it.
I loved that game. I remember, I'm sorry if I cut you off, but I remember getting that game, going into the basement because I got it for Christmas, home from college, went down to the basement every day and played it like the entire winter break, just about.
Yeah.
And just feeling like it felt so classic. Like it felt like it felt like the old game. I had played Final Fantasy 7, I had played Final Fantasy 8, but it called back to the first game in a lot of ways that I really appreciated because I had such an attachment to that first game, to the point where they're borrowing musical motifs and themes and like even reoccurring locations, which I thought was it might have been my first brush with nostalgia now that I think about it. That game was real good. It might be a little dated though, but it's a really good game. I think it is a little dated. I'll make that argument, but
even coming from someone who's only played like who had only played Adventure and the Three Legends and then played 7 and 8. Like when I played 9, I was like, oh, this is like a classic one. This is like if you were to tell one fantasy story, it would be something like this. In addition to like the whole introductory sequence in general, where they're like on stage and they're like as if they're in a play, and I felt like that was a metaphor for like the developers in general. I could even see something like a meta commentary on the way that they were telling a story at the time that I didn't quite know how to like say at the time, but like since I was only in grammar school, I also felt like the weight of it and how it felt like it was a playful art style in addition to being also the most mature, and it also had its own card game. So there were a lot of different things about it that were great and also unforgiving.
Yeah. That card game's got problems, man. Like
8 had the best card game. 8 still has the best card game. That's the best part of that game.
And, I got to say, Angelo, is that I actually, because I did go back and replay it recently, and I played it along with the Square Roots podcast. I'd started playing it before. When I got my Vita, like that's one of the first PS1 games that I bought for it. I had a blast playing on the Vita, and I actually appreciate it a little bit more now because, I had played, Final Fantasy 1 and 4 and 6 and 7 and 8, the ones that we had gotten in the States by that point. But I wouldn't say I was what I would consider myself as a like scholar of Final Fantasy, where I would say that I am now, where it's like I've spent a lot of time researching the series and writing about it and talking about it. So going back and playing it a couple years ago, like I was like, oh yeah, like this is totally from Final Fantasy 1. This is from Final Fantasy 5. This is a reference to 4 that I didn't quite get before. And like just little throwaway things too. Like, here's an item like on the auction house that's not even something that's worth anything, but it's, you remember this from Final Fantasy 3, and stuff like that. So like all that stuff is just really cool.
I missed anything that didn't call back to the very first game, and they weren't doing callbacks to anything that was PlayStation generation, but there was enough of it in there to make me just go, oh, that's real cute. That kind of thing. Yeah.
There actually is a callback to 7.
Really?
There's a Buster Sword in one of the weapon shops, and if you inspect it, like Zidane says, oh, I know a guy that I knew a guy with spiky hair that used to use one of these.
Oh, I think I do remember that, actually. Yeah. Now that I think about it.
There's some real good stuff in there.
Yeah, and it's got one of the best Final Fantasy characters ever. So
Vivi.
Yeah, you got to mention Vivi.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's probably my one issue with the game is that I don't love the cast as much as some of the other games. That game is about 4 people. It's Zidane, Dagger, Vivi, and Steiner. And like, I can't really get into the other characters, and I've tried, but I don't really care for Amaranth, and I don't like Quina, and Aiko is okay, but she seems redundant.
They felt like they were just there to support. Yeah.
I remember the first 4 characters you said, and the other ones are just struck from my memory.
Yeah. Over at Pixelbit, the same people who chimed in for Stage Select chimed in for Chrono Crossing. Jamie kicks things off with Chrono Cross. Oh, you know what, Xrian, this was your moment to shine. And you didn't come and comment on this episode, so it's your favorite game. But Jamie's got your back. He says beautiful graphics, awesome soundtrack, and the story was great. Probably the game I spent the most time with during that time period. And, we talked about earlier, like that game's great. I think at the time, I don't think I appreciated it too much because I was looking for like a true sequel to Chrono Trigger, and that's not what that game is. And too many characters, like the cast is way too huge, and for me, the story got like really like incomprehensible in that, late 90s, early 2000s Square Enix way.
Almost Nomura, yeah.
Almost. But still a really great game. And it looks like I love the art design in that game.
I love the music.
Yeah.
I love the music.
I don't remember the artist who did the character designs for that game, but I don't recall ever seeing him do anything else in video games. I could be wrong, but I really liked his art style. I would have liked to have seen him work on Final Fantasy.
It was another game that had one of the top opening cinematics of all time. When I looked up on a bunch of different lists, it was a recurring one. So I was thinking Chrono Trigger, but like a lot of people were saying Chrono Cross just because of the idea of like how stories are told and what it talks about as far as a meta commentary on, I've said that maybe too many times, but a meta commentary on like the idea of an archetype of a person and how like they're going through their lives.
Michael 117 says Majora's Mask.
Thank God.
I was 11, slowly losing my innocence. And Majora's Mask was the game that uncomfortably welcomed me to the new millennium. It was apocalyptic, bizarre, and forced you to acknowledge everyone's mortality. You get to be the hero trying to save the world full of sympathetic characters and interesting cultures, but the designers require you to fail everyone repeatedly along your macabre journey before you can eventually begin to piece it all together. All I remember is that moon, that ugly-looking moon.
Yeah. Over and over, just came right down upon me. And I couldn't take it anymore. Yeah.
It really is.
I would say that out of all the games that I talked about at last weekend in the Nintendo Switch, if you didn't listen to the special, I'll reiterate that game won in a landslide. When I asked every single person who played at my 2 stations what their favorite Legend of Zelda game was, the first 3 days it was like Majora's Mask, Majora's Mask, Majora's Mask. Well, I guess maybe Ocarina, Majora's Mask, Majora's Mask, A Link to the Past is pretty cool. Oh, Majora's Mask. Like, I was like, are you kidding?
So one person got it right is what you're telling me.
Yeah, it was like a couple of Link to the Past, and like there were a few Ocarinas, and then every single closed media person was saying Majora's Mask, and I was like, it's because you've seen a bunch of the top downs now. Now they're doing 3D in the way they're supposed to, so there's only one complaint you've got left. They've never made Majora's Mask again. Like, I mean, they redid it in the HD, or not HD, but 3D visuals, but they haven't made another Legend of Zelda game that's similar to it. And it's either, one person said Zelda 2, and that's just trolling. Like, but
no, I prefer Zelda 2 to the original. I know people disagree with me greatly on that, but I liked it better. And I think,
yeah, would you prefer it to Ocarina of Time?
No, I don't. And I actually tried them both recently.
Yeah.
But I don't really actually like either one that much. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can get behind that. Superstep says, and I'm glad he said this. He goes, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.
Yeah.
Really like the song You by Bad Religion. And, I'm glad he said that because I almost put Tony Hawk 2. Cause like I said before, like I was so jealous of people who had so much fun with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1, but I just couldn't play it because I had played so much of Street Skater by EA that the controls just like flummoxed me for Tony Hawk. So I bought Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 and I played the hell out of it, determined to get good at it. And I got decent, but that game's just so much fun. Like if I had to go back and play a Tony Hawk, it's that one. I think I might own that. I think I might have actually bought that one like recently because it's just so much fun. Like if I'm going to go back and relive any of those skating games, it's going to be that one. So I'm glad somebody said it.
I was so into those games too. And a lot of my friends would either come over, I'd go to their places and we would just like take turns trying to get the highest scores. And like, there wasn't like any leaderboard thing, but actually, Angelo, you talked about this earlier in this episode, like when did that die? Yeah. And I'm sure it was alive and well during that game because, well, I think Julian, you said that maybe died with that game actually.
I did. I thought that was the last game that had it that I could think of.
Now that I'm thinking of it, like my friends and I did that locally, like just trying to best each other's scores. And I'll remember like pulling off humongous combos and eventually like doing your like special move like the 900 or a Christ Air or maybe some sort of a dark slide or something like that. And literally trying to do that in the real world was hell on my knees, but I didn't know it at the time because I was just a kid.
Yeah, that was a game I wanted to get good at too and never quite did. Sorry, go on.
No, you're fine. Daft Man also says Chrono Cross, and he says, let's get this out of the way up front. Chrono Cross is a bad sequel to Chrono Trigger, but taking on its own merits as an RPG, it's fantastic. It's a gorgeous PS1 game, has one of the best soundtracks in gaming. Its plot is full of twists and turns, and the battle system was very unique. I've played it several times and would love to go back and experience it again. So, all very good points.
I do love how that game locked you into progression. Like, it wouldn't let you level up until you got past a boss. So you're like, here's what you have. You need to solve this puzzle, essentially, that's in front of you. You need to figure out how to get past this level, get past this boss with what you have. And, then we'll let you level up. I thought that was a neat thing. Not a whole lot of RPGs do that. Like, not a lot at all. That was kind of cool. And bold, really. It was a very brave decision, considering part of the genre is about the idea that anybody can just work hard enough and eventually beat it.
Yeah. There were a lot of bold decisions in that game for sure. Mm-hmm. Having 40 characters is definitely a bold decision.
Bold might not be the right word for that. Excessive comes to mind. Ridiculous.
Just a bit.
Yeah.
Just a bit. Over on Twitter, again, that's at NWPcast. We have Philip at PK Becker who says Perfect Dark for the N64.
Good. I'm glad that game got mentioned.
I did not play Perfect Dark. Period. Like, I guess I probably like tried it real quick in the store, but it didn't do anything for me. But I didn't like GoldenEye, so it didn't. Perfect Dark just seemed like a sci-fi version of GoldenEye to me. Like it was impressive with the expansion pack for sure, but it just didn't do much for me.
And that's what I liked about it. That it was like GoldenEye. Nothing wrong with James Bond and all that stuff, but GoldenEye wasn't its own thing. It really wasn't. Like, this was its own thing. And I didn't have an N64, and I wasn't big into N64, but I remember thinking, wow, this is way cooler than GoldenEye. Still wasn't really that into it, but totally understood why people were, more so than I did for GoldenEye.
See, on the other side of it, like, I'd grown up watching every James Bond movie with my dad and didn't understand, like, the difference between an original IP and, like, a licensed IP at that time because I was so young. So when GoldenEye came out, it was like, oh, yes. And like my friends and I would always have 4 people playing together. And when Perfect Dark came out, it was like, but there's not James Bond. That's not GoldenEye. And so I was
no Golden Gun.
Yeah, it was the exact opposite for me. Like there was no I mean, maybe there were unlockables just like that with like paintball mode and things like that, but there were no like believable characters to me because I had known them for so long in so many different James Bond movies. Like I can look right now and I see the entire James Bond collection that I own and I've watched multiple times. I'm so big into James Bond. So when that game was like huge, like I was huge.
Moving on. James Kalunga on Twitter at J_Kalunga says lots of good stuff that year, but I'll go with Jet Set Radio. I first played it at E3
Nice.
and loved the cel-shaded graphics. So nice to see somebody give Sega a bone.
Yeah. And that
Guys.
was another unique one. I mean, there's so much. This was a good year for like creative, original stuff. I think it really seems like.
Casey at Officer Meeseeks says Pokemon Gold. Still the gold standard, pun not intended, for sequels in my opinion.
Nice.
Had more content post-game than most sequels do, period. Again,
Wasn't it the exact same game as the first one?
They're all the exact same game as the first one, Patrick. I'll actually be glad once we get past 1999 so nobody can pick Pokemon anymore. Or wait, it's not 98? No, we still got some time. But I'll be what I'm saying is I'll be glad when people can't say Pokemon for Chrono Crossing anymore. I understand that you guys love it and like you grew up with it and stuff, but it's just, it wasn't me and Angelo's generation.
I'm going to have to pick red when it comes.
It's just funny to think that like when we think RPGs, we think Final Fantasy. And then there's a whole other generation that when they think RPGs, they think Pokemon.
Yeah.
That is a funny thought.
It's like when one generation thinks of it like you should die all the time and maybe not be able to complete the game. And when the other generation thinks of it, it's like you should be held by the hand throughout the entire game and maybe never die.
And get a participation trophy.
You've beaten the Elite Eight.
I'm joking.
We have a new participant. I don't know if he just liked the Twitter comment and doesn't listen to the show, but if you do, thanks for participating because you haven't brought us anything before. But this is Will I Ain't, and he's at Twitter at Will_I_ain't3, and he says Final Fantasy IX. Spent a lot of time with it back then, and have always meant to revisit. So I'm right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
JD Adamith noticed JD.
Oh no,
says Pokemon Stadium. But he says, I was just getting into hardcore games, so I wasn't too aware of all the other options. So
fair enough.
Now you are, JD.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, you've probably played other games from then since, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah.
We have Ken at Canola Bar, and he says, Skies of Arcadia, which I thought for sure Casey would have picked. So I'm glad somebody said it. Skies of Arcadia is really cool. I was actually thinking about that because I really liked the airship battles. And I wish that they would add something like that to Mass Effect where you have like ship to ship combat. But they already said that like the ship that you have in Andromeda doesn't have any weapons on it. So there goes my dream for that one.
It's still like, it's my biggest regret for a game that I returned without playing it because I wanted to play another game. And that was at the time when I couldn't get every game. I only got one a year or two a year, like I said. And there was I think a Ratchet and Clank or something like that I wanted to play or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the Skies of Arcadia I had to return just for something else. And like my mom was so sad that she picked the wrong game. And I still feel like I let her down for not playing Skies of Arcadia. It's like, what was I doing with my life?
It's really good, but I didn't finish it. And that kind of began that trend of me buying games and then not finishing them, because like for a while there, like I finished every game that I bought, but it was such a long game and everything, and there was so much coming out that I just I was like, okay, I understand what this is, I really like it, but I'm moving on.
Yeah, I have it on my backlog.
We are going to move on to end this episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening and for participating. We love it when you guys hit us up on Twitter or at pixelbit.com. And you'll do that again for our next episode because What are we doing for Stage Select, Patrick?
Our top 3 canceled games.
Yes. And we'll also be Chrono Crossing back to 1999, the year that American Pie came out.
Oh,
and
Nadia.
Yeah, that's what everybody thought just now. And yeah, that'll do it. Just a quick, little announcement. So, next episode, we're Chrono Crossing back to 1999, and we'll be a regular format show. And Angelo, you'll be tasked with coming up with our next Stage Select of that episode. But the episode after, so that'll be episode 109, is going to be all dedicated to 1998. So it's going to be all about that one topic because 1998 is too big of a year to just have everybody pick one game. So just keep that in mind, everybody. Be thinking about 1998 as a whole and everything. And, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to try to get a guest, but just want everybody to be aware of that. As always, you can find us on Twitter. Patrick.
At some boss.
Angelo.
I'm at a roguish ham.
You can find me at Julian_Titus. And you can also find the show at NWPcast. And yeah, that will do it. So for myself, Patrick, and Angelo, thanks for listening. And keep it pantsless, Internet. Goodbye.
The party of a lifetime, 31st of December. Man, I remember when the ball dropped for 90. Now it's 9-9. 10 years behind me. What's gonna happen? Don't nobody know. We'll see when the clock hits the 12:00. Chaos, the cops gonna block the street. Man, who the hell cares? Don't stop the beat. No time to sleep. Yo, it's on tonight. KC, you feeling me, right? 2000 will 2K. The new millennium, yo, excuse me, millennium. Can't get thicker than this. Slick like Rick, I can't miss.
So lay it on us, Patrick.
All right, well, I had it down to 2 different topics, and oh shit. Let's see. Okay. Can you name can you give me a level for a game that's already been made that was not made? Can you make a game for? Can you make a level for a game that hasn't been made? No,
we did that.
What? No, oh shit. No, oh shit. Shit, that was the first one that I didn't delete. Shit.
Tell me this is staying in.
No, it's not. Don't make me a dumbass because I've drank a whole bottle of wine.
Patrick.
Okay. Can you give me the 3 best games that were never been made? That had never been made?
We did that one too.
No, we didn't. Like StarCraft Ghost and things like that. Like real.
Oh, you mean canceled games that never came out?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Maybe you want to rephrase it, and then I'll cut.
You want to know our top 3 games that were canceled that we wished weren't? Maybe that. How's that for a way to phrase it?
I want to say it.
Say it, Patrick. Do it.
I can't.
I absolutely hate the stupid GoPro when it's pointed at people's face. I hate that. No matter who it is, whenever they do that, it could be like a top 10 fashion model, and all of a sudden when they do that, their face just looks so stupid. Like it looks so slappable. Like their face just becomes this giant target that says insert fist here. It's awful. You just have the stupidest looking face because it's all like fish-eyed and bent, and it's
Tell me how you really feel, Angelo.
I just hate the way it looks. And I know Patrick's been drinking more than I have.